today. We're going to start, I think we're going to start with Senator Watson. It's going to be in the one spot today, and we're going to start with Senate Bill 816. And Senator Watson, you are the only in-person witness on the bill, so.
Thank you. I've never gone first before. I'm moving up in the world.
Yep.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, colleagues of the EEE Committee. For the record, I'm Senator Ron Watson, representing the 23rd District of Prince George's County. Today, I'm presenting Senate Bill 816. Senate Bill 816 is a straightforward proposal with a clear objective to ensure that the Public Service Commission reflects the full geographic diversity of the state of Maryland. Under current law, Section 2-102 of the Public Utilities Article mandates that PSC members be broadly representative of the geographic and demographic diversity of the state and of the public. However, this requirement lacks specificity and has resulted in a commission that does not always guarantee representation for every region of Maryland. At present, the PSC consists of commissioners from only 3 counties, and historically, it has not consistently lived up to the goal of geographic diversity. This bill addresses that shortcoming by increasing the members of the PSC from 5 to 7 members, establishing a district-based system for PSC appointments. Specifically, commissioners would be required to reside in one of 5 designated regions. Western Maryland, 1 commissioner. Eastern Shore, 1 commissioner. Southern Maryland, 1 commissioner. The Capital Region, which includes Prince George's, Montgomery counties, 2 commissioners, and the Greater Baltimore Region, 2 commissioners. This structure balances regional representation while accounting for population distribution. Additionally, this method of organizing a public utility commission by districts is well established, as 9 other states have successfully implemented similar systems. By ensuring that every part of the state has a voice on the PSC, this legislation will make the commission more accountable to all Marylanders, particularly when making critical decisions such as approving certificates of public convenience and necessity for projects with significant regional impacts. Finally, the bill includes a technical clarification to confirm that the chair of the PSC must be selected from among the commissioners. It is also worth noting that this bill and its cross-file, House Bill 651 by Delegate Pippy, have garnered bipartisan support from General Assembly members representing all regions of the state. For these reasons, I respectfully urge this committee to give a favorable report on Senate Bill 816.
Okay, thank you, Senator Watson. We've got Senator Carrozza with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Watson, thank you for Senate Bill 816. I was pleased to be a co-sponsor, and you are confirming in the bill that the Eastern Shore is included, and I thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Okay, Senator Hester.
Oh, thank you. This is a really interesting bill. I was just curious, do the commissioners have to have certain expertise?
I'm not aware of that, Senator Fry.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay, additional questions for Senator Watson? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 816. Let's next go to Senator Brooks. Senator Brooks, you've got 2 bills. We're going to start with Senate Bill 716, and we've got former Senator Roger Manno here and Ray Baker are the 2 witnesses, both signed up favorable. And so, Senator Brooks, if you could start, and then we'll go to Senator Manno and Mr. Baker. And why don't you take your time you need to present Senate Bill 716.
All right, thanks, Chair Feldman, and my great committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you on Senate Bill 716. The Decarbonization Infrastructure Solution Act of 2025. The purpose of this bill is to supercharge our state's transition to clean energy by integrating nuclear energy into Maryland's Tier 1 renewable source for the renewable portfolio standards and establishing a framework for procuring this source while ensuring that our state communities and labor forces benefit from these investments. And in short, it's a blueprint for Maryland's clean energy future. Before I go into the details of SB 716, I want to explain the motivation for this bill. This year, the General Assembly has prioritized nuclear power as one of the many solutions to developing more in-state energy generation. My Abundant, Affordable, Clean Energy Act, ACE Act, heard in this committee earlier in the session, particularly answers the call by ensuring that Calvert Cliffs have the resources to relicense and continue to provide clean energy for our state. However, the ACE Act stops short of procuring new nuclear facilities. That's why I'm introducing the Decarbonization Infrastructure Solution Act to finish the job of building more nuclear generation that is safer, more efficient, and more reliable than ever before. Two other bills already heard by this committee, the Governor's Energize Plan and the Next Generation Energy Act, are also both seek to procure new nuclear facilities in our state. Both bills establish a similar framework for procuring new nuclear by allowing the Public Service Commission to create a non-bypassable surcharge. This will allow an electric company the ability to recover all costs associated with the purchase of nuclear energy from its customers. Developing an incentive structure funded by ratepayers is crucial for building new nuclear power plants in Maryland. It is no secret that nuclear energy requires large investments and financial security, and in the long term. However, this investment in nuclear power pays dividends in the form of abundant and clean power. SB 716 is the last piece of the puzzle for creating a nuclear incentive structure by including nuclear energy as Tier 1 source in the RPS. Since 2004, the RPS has been a successful framework for incentivizing the development of both solar and offshore wind. However, this additional of nuclear to the RPS will not undermine or take away from other Tier 1 sources. It simply allows for nuclear to also receive incentives. When it comes to meeting our state climate goal, nuclear energy is an unparalleled source and would be a valuable addition to the RPS. Nuclear power stands out for its nominal land use, requiring just 0.3 square meters of land per megawatt hour of energy produced. Additionally, nuclear energy emits no greenhouse gases, making it a crucial ally in the fight against climate change. Most importantly, nuclear power boosts the highest capacity factor of any energy source, with plants operating at full capacity more than 92% of the time. This reliability is nearly twice that of natural gas and coal, and up to 3 times more dependable than wind and solar. In 2023, Maryland's only nuclear power plant, the Calvert Cliff Power Station, accounted for 40% of the state's total electric generation. Adding nuclear energy to the RPS. This bill will add new nuclear energy generated from licensed stations, including SMRs, or small modular reactors, to list of Tier 1 renewables in the RPS. Moreover, a certain percentage of energy derived from nuclear sources will then be increased annually, while allocating starting at 4% in 2026 and growing up to 50% by 2040. This change will ultimately help Maryland achieve a new goal of having 100% renewable energy by 2040. To clarify, the bill will not disrupt other investments in clean energy technologies, including wind, solar, and geothermal. Additionally, only nuclear energy generating stations built after October 2025 will be eligible for inclusion in the RPS. Both the governor's empowering new energy resources and green initiatives toward a zero-emission Energize Maryland Act and the Senate Bill 716 aim to achieve 100% clean energy for Maryland. While both recognize the role of nuclear energy in this transition, they differ in their approaches. SB 716 explicitly incorporates nuclear energy into the renewable energy portfolio as a Tier 1 renewable source and sets specific minimum percentages for nuclear energy contributions to meet the RPS requirements. The Energize Maryland Act acknowledges the necessity of nuclear energy to achieve its clean energy goals, but does not specify exactly percentages, allowing for flexibility in nuclear energy contributions within the clean energy portfolio standard. In summary, while both legislative initiatives leverage nuclear power to attain Maryland's clean energy objectives, SB 716 provide explicit targets for new nuclear energy within the RPS, whereas the Energize Maryland Act maintains a more flexible approach regarding nuclear energy's role in the CEPS. The Decarbonization Infrastructure Solution Act of 2025, SB 716, should not be viewed as competing with other proposed legislation. Instead, it acknowledges the practical aspect of increasing Maryland's clean energy supply and offers specific incentives for potential nuclear energy producers considering operations within the state. NREX, the bill will also establish nuclear energy generation station incentive program where certified nuclear energy generation stations can produce nuclear renewable energy credits. These generation stations must be located in Maryland and have a certain generation capacity to be eligible for the program. The compliance value of NREX shall be set on a yearly basis by the PSC to ensure that competitiveness of all renewables technologies. There is also a mandate that these compliance values not be allowed to fall below under $50 per megawatt hour to generate more than 75 megawatt hours. Yeah. The procurement, the Decarbonization Infrastructure Solution Act of 2025, SB 716, establishes a comprehensive framework for the PSC to evaluate and approve nuclear energy generation projects. The PSC assessment will encompass various factors, including cost implications for ratepayers, environmental and economic benefits, and feasibility of proposed projects. Yeah. The bill mandates fair labor practices, such as collective bargaining rights to ensure equitable treatment of workers involved in the nuclear energy projects. Ratepayer benefit, it requires that proceeds from nuclear projects directly benefit ratepayers, ensuring that consumers receive tangible advantages from these initiatives. This legislation includes measures to protect both ratepayers and the state from potential cost overruns associated with nuclear projects, promoting financial accountability. And SB 716 imposed caps on energy costs to prevent excessive charges, thereby safeguarding consumers from unreasonable energy expenses. Collectively, these measures aim to balance the advancement of nuclear energy infrastructure with the protection of consumer interests and the promotion of fair labor standards. For these reasons, I am requesting a favorable report on SB 716.
Thank you, Senator Brooks. Mr. Baker, why don't you go next, then we'll go.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. My name is Ray Baker. I'm the Maryland Director of the Baltimore, D.C. Building Trades Council, representing more than 28 different affiliates and 30,000 union construction workers. We urge a favorable report on SB 716. Specifically, as we heard Senator Brooks allude to, there are mandates in the bill that make provisions for both local and minority business opportunities and labor standards and collective bargaining agreements. And I would like to echo that our members stand ready, excited, willing, capable, and eager to deliver this work that will be a benefit to Marylanders by job opportunity and creation and a benefit to ratepayers throughout the state. So with that, we urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 716.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baker. Senator Mano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Roger Mano on behalf of a consortium of construction trades unions and signatory contractors. These include the Mid-Atlantic Pipe Trades Association, the Iron Workers, and the Mechanical Contractors Association of Metro Washington, some 200 union signatory contractors. We appreciate Senator Brooks for introducing this legislation, and we strongly support it. As this committee knows well, Maryland is at a crossroads. With fossil fuel plants like Wagner and Brandon Shores retiring, we're challenged to meet ambitious clean energy targets while ensuring reliable, dispatchable, zero-carbon power. Senate Bill 716 provides a market-based solution by integrating nuclear energy into the RPS, which is a proven credit-based system that protects ratepayers without direct subsidies or wholly government-controlled contracts. Unlike traditional procurement programs that impose fixed price surcharges, this bill drives private investment through nuclear energy credits, or NRECs, a competitive mechanism under PSC oversight that gives utilities flexibility and shields ratepayers from price volatility. The case for nuclear is clear. It's zero carbon, highly reliable, and has one of the lowest life cycle emission footprints, comparable to wind and hydro, but with a far greater capacity factor. In fact, with technology upgrades in fusion, potentially within the time frame to build a third fission reactor, nuclear is posed to represent a nearly limitless life cycle renewability profile. It's also worth noting that nuclear is by far the most racially diverse and union-dense energy sector, not just in the RPS, but across all energy sectors. Check the stats, they're staggering. And with the bill's market-driven ability to allow nuclear to compete on equal footing with other Tier 1 renewables, but with strong PSC safeguards to protect solar and wind, the bill incentivizes private sector investment while ensuring affordability and grid stability. It's not a traditional procurement mandate. It's market-driven, and we'd ask for a favorable report.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the sponsor, Senator Brooks, or our two witnesses at the table? Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 716. Senator Brooks, why don't you stay there? Senate Bill 983, you're the only in-person witness, so let's take up Senate Bill 983 next.
Yes. All right, Chair Feldman and the members of my great committee, thank you again for the opportunity to testify before you on Senate Bill 983. That's a solar energy distributed generated certificate of public convenience and necessity. This bill will establish the distributed generation certificate of public convenience and necessity. Acronym is DG-CPCN, a new certification process required for constructing and operating solar energy projects between 2 and 5 megawatts in the state of Maryland. This new process is designed to streamline the development of renewable energy infrastructure while ensuring environmental protection and public safety. What's the problem that this bill is fixing? 2 years ago, I sponsored legislation making the community solar program permanent in Maryland. Those projects are being implemented, and we are poised to be leaders in that arena. SB 983 builds off of that success of the CSP and serves to work in conjunction with that legislation. While we provided additional incentives in 2023 to build community solar on rooftops, brownfields, industrial zones, and parking lots, the truth is the community solar will also need to be constructed on the ground. According to a power plant research program, which conducts the initial CPCN review, they are anticipating nearly 60 CSP applications in the next few months. Just 2 years ago, PPRP reviewed only 7 CPCN applications. According to the Coalition for Community Solar Access, which has polled its members, there are 130 more community solar projects under development and will require a CPCN application. Under current law, 2 to 5 megawatt community solar projects must go through a CPCN process that was initially designed for large-scale plants. For reference, the CPCN process was originally created for the Power Plant Siting Act of 1971 in response to concerns over the ability of the state to provide significant technical review of the impact of the proposed Calvert Cliffs nuclear power plant. However, this comprehensive review process does not make sense for smaller community solar projects, which are usually sized between 2 to 5 megawatts. While the current CPCN review is valuable for ensuring high standards for new power plant projects, the rise in community solar projects may, in fact, be overburdened by state agencies and developers with unnecessary roadblocks. SB 983 would require the Power Plant Research Program to develop sightings, standard sightings and design requirements for community solar projects and submit it to the PSC. These requirements must be in line with the state's renewable energy commitment, incorporating environmental preservation, reasonable setback, landscaping screening, and strict adherence to stormwater management, erosion, and site stabilization. Additionally, these projects are required to ensure public safety, follow industry best practices, and comply and specify licensing conditioning previously established by the Commission for Solar Energy Generating Systems. This process will be developed in collaboration with local government, agricultural interest, apologize for that, and local agriculture interests, environmental advocates, and solar industry. Once these regulations are adopted, the DGCPCN will be issued after a review by the PSC. SB 983 should work well with the Chairman's Senate Bill 931, Renewable Energy Certainty Act, which we heard in the last Friday, that will set certain siting standards for all solar projects. My legislation will likely lead to more stringent siting standards, which will be developed through a collaborative process with many stakeholders in exchange for a more expedited path to obtaining a CPCN. If both SB 931 and SB 983 pass, then community solar developers would have the choice to apply for a traditional CPCN under new siting standards envisioned in the Chairman's bill, or for a more expedited CPCN with more stringent siting standards under this bill. The benefits of this bill is clear. Streamlining the CPCN process for community solar projects will accelerate the deployment of clean energy, contributing to Maryland's climate and renewable energy goals. By establishing clear standardized requirements, we reduce uncertainty for developers and simplify the participation for counties and interested parties, ultimately making the development process more efficient and predictable. By facilitating the inclusion of more community solar projects that can serve low and moderate income families, we reinforce our commitment to equitable access and renewable energy. SB 983 actively involves local government and other stakeholders in the decision-making process as we seek to identify certain standards for those smaller power generation projects uniformly across all 24 jurisdictions. Based on stakeholders' input and industry best practices, notably, the bill will propose amendments developed in collaboration with the PSC and the PPRP, has garnered support from Maryland Association of Counties, the Coalition for Community Solar Access, the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association, and the Solar Industry Association, as well as the environmental advocacy groups. The bill will help guide solar development in Maryland and ensure that community solar projects can be constructed in a timely manner so we can achieve the equity, energy, and economic benefit promised by the legislation this body has already passed. For that reason, Mr. Chair, I am requesting a favorable report on SB 983.
Thank you, Senator Brooks. Questions for the sponsor? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 983. Next up, we're going to take Senator Reedy, Senate Bill 947. And Senator, I don't know if you want to bring anybody up. There's 2 witnesses signed up on the bill.
Yes, is Ms. Frederick here?
Yes, Joanne Frederick, and then we have 1 additional witness signed up favor with amendments, Alex Pavlak, but I think it's separate. So Senator Reedy, why don't you proceed? Senate Bill 946.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Energy, Education, and Environment Committee. I may have gotten that twisted around, but I got close. Okay, great. Education, Energy, and Environment. I think that's it. Okay, there we go.
Mr. Pavlak, why don't you take a seat first row, because I don't think you're part of this kind of formal panel, so we'll take you up next. And
the input is welcome, but yeah.
Yeah, Senator Reedy.
Senate Bill 947, here to present Senate Bill 947, which just going to give a quick mention of what the bill does and talk a little bit about the overall issue. So Senate Bill 947 would require the Public Service Commission to adopt regulations and provide a framework for energy generation facilities that are not interconnected with the electric transmission or distribution system. The goal is to promote energy independence, reliability, and environmental responsibility with data centers while ensuring fairness to ratepayers and alignment with the state's energy goals. We've had a lot of discussion, of course, about the state's energy supply goals, et cetera. Maryland really stands at a crossroads right now, and I know everybody on this committee has been sitting through a lot of hearings about all of these issues, but we stand at a crossroads of energy innovation, balancing the need for sustainable development with the demands of modern infrastructure. And as data centers are emerging more and more as a need regionally, and certainly we've opened up to allow to make some things possible for at least 1 data center to be in Maryland, and probably there are goals to have more. The energy requirements of these data centers present huge challenges for us. And so the Maryland Public Service Commission has come out with a report on co-location, and it highlights existing configurations called Type A and Type B agreements, which begin to address those needs. But emerging trends and technological advancements, we believe, call for complementary solutions to get more flexibility, more economic benefit, more sustainability. With importing 40% of our energy, adding in a number of data centers is tremendously concerning to people that I represent. Obviously, the area that I represent has been impacted, is potentially going to be very negatively impacted by a massive power line that's largely going to bypass Maryland's ratepayers and go right to feeding Northern Virginia data centers. And so it's obviously an issue that's very important to the people I represent and the communities that I'm involved with. But this bill will allow for Type C and Type D co-location arrangements to be part of the PSC's framework for energy policy. A Type C model proposes a fully off-grid solution, which enables data centers to achieve complete energy independence. It would eliminate a reliance on the public utility grid and minimize transmission-related inefficiencies. It's also very challenging. It's not something that just is easily, quickly set up and no muss, no fuss. So it's a challenging setup, something I think we need to explore more and more as a country as we relate to data centers. And a Type D model builds on that foundational element of Type C, but it has conditional grid connectivity. And under that configuration, a co-located generation facility primarily serves the data center, but can export surplus energy onto the grid under specific conditions, and can provide some benefit to ratepayers and still help us with not having as much overhead transmission be necessary. So again, we really have to get a handle on how we're handling data centers in the state. I supported last year legislation to try to make it possible for a data center to come here. not knowing some of what was going on as it relates to overhead transmission lines. Now, that one data center is not the reason why this overhead transmission line is now being projected in my community, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if we start having lots and lots more data centers coming into the state, it's going to continue to exacerbate our energy problems. The governor has talked a lot about economic development and wanting to grow in some key sectors of our economy. And generally, I agree, we want to be on the cutting edge of life sciences and other types of technological advancements in the area of IT. But it's going to be very difficult to be on the front cutting edge of quantum if we don't have reliable energy sources, but also if we have all these data centers that would come with that. You all know the problem. You've been sitting through hearings on a lot of the problem. So this is an attempt to try to have the PSC really start to put together a regulatory framework for some of these alternative solutions. And Mr. Chairman, I would ask for a favorable report. And I would also ask for consideration that if this is not the bill, but you're putting together a package on this, that this be a consideration, be part of whatever package we do. Obviously, I'd love for you to pass the bill, but I know you're considering a whole lot of energy bills, and I think I'm assuming there's going to be more of an omnibus approach to some of this. So we want to be here to be part of that conversation. We think this is very important for the future of our state's energy grid. And with that, I'll take some questions when we're done, but I'd love to have Ms. Frederick speak next.
Okay, Ms. Frederick, you're going to be on the up to 2-minute clock. Okay,
Yes, sir.
I hope you understand that.
I do.
You signed up favorable, so whenever you're ready.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan. My name is Joanne Frederick. I represent Stop NPRP, an organization founded to save our land from transmission. I urge you to issue a favorable report for Senate Bill 947, the Maryland Co-Location Energy Innovation and Reliability Act. Maryland is facing an energy crisis driven in part by explosive new demand from data centers, each of which requires the power equivalent to 100,000 homes. If we don't act now, PJM will continue using their old rusty hammer to nail outdated transmission solutions for load growth, forcing us into a system that wastes time, money, and land. Senate Bill 947 prepares Maryland to bring new power generation online quickly outside of PJM's slow and costly transmission queue. Instead of waiting a decade for bureaucratic approval, this bill requires data centers to co-locate their own power generation, ensuring they do not overload the grid or drive up costs for ratepayers. If we allow PJM's broken process to dictate Maryland's future, we will see more land taken for transmission lines, more delays and higher costs, all while failing to meet our energy needs. Senate Bill 947 is a forward-thinking solution that lets Maryland support economic growth while protecting our land, grid reliability, and financial interests. Of note, Senate Bill 116 is the Data Center Study Act bill, and I know that is working its way through the process. Senate Bill 947 enables us to be ready should Maryland decide we want to lean forward into the data center industry. So when that legislation happens and passes, we'll be ready with the right way to power these. We cannot afford to let PJM's outdated approach dictate Maryland's future. I urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 947 to keep Maryland ahead of the curve and off the chopping block for unnecessary transmission expansion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Any questions for Senator Reedy or Ms. Frederick? Okay, seeing none, thank you both. We do have Alex Pavlak. Alex, I'll call you up. You're signed up favorable with amendments. So you'll be on the 2-minute clock, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Pavlak. I'm a PhD engineer from Severna Park, chairman of the Future of Energy Initiative. I want to thank Senator Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan for the opportunity to comment on SB 947. A nuclear power plant owner builds a plant that sells electricity to the commercial grid. It's competing with electricity that's priced at 3.5 cents kilowatt hour. That's what PJM pays its electric generators for electricity. If a data center wants electric power, it has to plug it into the grid, and it pays 9 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity. That's a big difference. If the data center is big enough to justify off-the-grid commercial power or off-the-grid electric power, it can be made more reliable than the power grid, and you are data centers would move to Maryland simply because it's cheaper and more reliable to do so. That if the data centers move to Maryland and site in Maryland, the need for the new transmission line across western Maryland just goes away. I see this bill as a welcome mat for off-the-grid nuclear-powered data centers. The concept is the way this industry is likely to evolve, and this is Maryland's opportunity. It's probably a brief window, but you have a window of opportunity here to be a real leader in large off-the-grid data centers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pavlak. Any questions for our witness? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 947. We're going to next go to Senator Carrozza, Senate Bill 675. Senator, and I see you want to bring Tammy Bresnahan up here, Travis Fisher. I don't know if Ben Baker, do you want to just come up here? Signed up favorable amendments, so that'll be the proponents panel, and then we do have one witness unfavorable, which we'll take up next. So, Senator Carrozza, Senate Bill 675.
Senator Hershey, my colleague, you just didn't.
Was he planning to attend?
He was planning, and we'll go ahead, and hopefully he can join us.
If he shows up, we'll let him testify.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On cue. Minority Leader. And we even saved a seat for you. Thank you. Okay, Senator Carrozza, you take the time you need to present Senate Bill 675.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the Senate Education, Energy, and Environmental Affairs Committee. And I am pleased and excited to present this bill, especially having my friend and colleague, the Senate Minority Leader, join us, and a recognized expert on energy issues in the state. I will be presenting Senate Bill 675, which I will present to you as a pro-ratepayer energy bill. And I want to thank my colleagues on this committee who have co-sponsored the legislation, including Senators Attar and Brooks, Gallion, Simonaire, and Watson. And I appreciate your co-sponsoring this important bipartisan legislation that does prioritize our ratepayers who deserve to know the true and full cost of energy generation. Now, we all know, because we are experiencing it ourselves personally, and our constituents well know, that we are in the middle of an energy crisis. Let's think about that. Regional electricity demand growth due to data center development in Virginia, as well as Maryland's intense electrification efforts, have unfortunately led to the premature retirement of certain coal and oil generation facilities without an adequate replacement. And this has caused energy rates to skyrocket. I want to point out that during the 2025 and 2026 PJM capacity auction, energy prices increased by 800% compared to the prior year. PJM has released new electricity demand forecasts that indicate our region could see a capacity shortage as soon as June of 2026. The rising cost of electricity has crippled the finances of many of our constituents. This bill, Senate Bill 675, would require the Public Service Commission to conduct an analysis of the full cost and benefits of sources of electricity generation in the state, and to recommend policy changes to support the development of energy sources based on the lowest cost and greatest benefit to the ratepayers, and that is the key to the bill. I do want to point out to my colleagues, and I'm learning as we go along, I'm not the expert that I have to my left here, and an important term to highlight in this legislation is the word full. Currently, calculating the levelized cost of electricity, or LCOE, is the most popular method used to compare the cost of generating electricity using different technologies. A company called Lazard, a financial advisory asset Management Company is best known for producing this levelized cost of electricity report. However, LCOE is a limited calculation method as it leaves out important factors regarding renewable energy, such as the impact of intermittency and non-dispatchability, and the levelized cost of electricity calculation fails to capture the full and total cost of energy generation. As Maryland transitions toward renewable energy sources and electrification, we as policymakers have a responsibility to ensure grid reliability and affordability for residents. The levelized cost of electricity is in many ways an outdated calculation method that it does not factor in the full costs of modern energy generation. And that is why Senate Bill 675 would use different calculation methods that Senator Hershey will speak to in more detail. We must put our constituents first, and that means understanding how the development of various energy sources would impact the ratepayers. This bipartisan bill is a common sense approach to ensure the full cost and benefits in developing energy are calculated, and we as a body would be able to consider policy recommendations that prioritize the lowest cost and greatest benefit to the ratepayers. We are all well aware, as we are hearing today, that there are countless energy bills that are being considered by the Maryland General Assembly this session. And I would respectfully request that this pro-ratepayers energy bill, Senate Bill 675, be part of a package of energy bills to be considered by this committee and by this body. I thank you for your kind attention and consideration, and I respectfully request a favorable report of Senate Bill 675. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Carrozza. Senator Hershey?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to Senator Carrozza for allowing me to come and testify here with you as well. Mr. Chairman, as the committee might remember, last Friday in the presentation of the first bill, there was a industry expert that was at the panel that had the slideshow and talked about a number of different items, of which she focused on the levelized cost of electricity as one of her slides, and was able to go through a number of the different generating sources and what they actually cost. And what's interesting, and Mr. Chairman, you know from many years of doing this, in so many of our policy decisions, we're always asking the question, how does this impact the ratepayers? When we make a change to the RPS, when we decide to, up the percentages or take something out, everything that we try to talk about is how do we recognize what the cost to the ratepayers are. And I think what we need to take a look at, and certainly this would happen with Senator Carrozza's bill, is something that's referred to as the levelized full system cost of electricity. And that compares the cost of serving the entire market using just one generating source, plus storage, in contrast to the levelized cost of electricity and other alternatives. The levelized full cost of electricity condenses the cost for each technology into one number per market. And I think as we're going forward with how we're looking to solve a lot of Maryland's energy issues, as we're looking towards potentially generating in-state, it is incumbent for us to make sure that we recognize to the best extent possible and using all the technologies that we have and techniques that we have to find out what these costs would be. And in Senator Carrozza's bill and what we've heard from the Public Service Commission as well, too.
Senator, you're not on the clock, so just.
Okay, thank you very much. But we're just simply asking the Public Service Commission to help us with this study to identify the true cost to better help us in our policy-making decisions. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I also ask for a favorable report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's, who wants to go next? We'll just go through the panel, and then we'll take questions. Tammy, why don't you go next?
Sure. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the EEE Committee, Environment, Education, Environment, and Energy Committee. I'm Tammy Bresnahan. I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy for AARP Maryland, representing nearly 850,000 members across the state, many of whom are older ratepayers living on fixed incomes. ARP, as you know, is very committed to ensuring that electricity is affordable and reliable for older consumers. Rising energy costs can place a significant financial strain on retirees and those living on fixed incomes. And we saw that this morning. As many of you know, we had an advocacy day here in Annapolis, and when I asked them how many of them are seeing an increase in their bills, everyone, all 100 of them raised their hand. All 100. And so that leads me to believe that we really need to do something. So when Senator Carrozza called me, she didn't tell me I'd be here with Senator Hershey, who's one of my favorites as well. We've been working on a lot of legislation around utilities for many years. Affordability is paramount for older ratepayers. We believe that without the analysis, ratepayers may be, may be left out of the equation, and a clear picture of cost will shift over time, and we want to make sure that they are represented. We are also concerned and make sure that the Public Service Commission has the jurisdiction, because we know that they have limited authority over energy generation. And we also feel like that the bill is who is responsible for building and maintaining the energy infrastructure. We know that PJM plays a vital role, and we want to make sure that when generation is determined, that we take that into consideration. Senator Hershey and Senator Carrozza talk about the levelized full system. We recognize the importance of inclusion of the levelized full system cost of electricity, but suggest allowing flexibility for modeling approaches. ARP Maryland supports cost-effective electricity generation, transmission, and storage solutions that keep rates low for Marylanders, and we ask for a favorable report. I just want you to know, I'm here with two of my favorites, and this is my last hearing in EEE. I retire April 4th, so I'm pretty sure this is the last time I'll be here.
We would have to pass her last.
So somebody please pop a picture, would you?
Okay, well, congratulations on that big announcement. It's been beamed out to the internet, to millions of people who watch us on a daily basis. So
thank you.
Okay, take one smile for your official retirement photo. Okay, well, congratulations, Tammy.
True Piper, yes.
Okay, let's get back on Senate Bill 675. And sir, give us your name, and you're going to be on the 2-minute clock. Go.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, members. I'm Travis Fisher. I'm the Director of Energy and Environmental Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. Cato is a nonpartisan public policy research organization in Washington, D.C. that promotes individual liberty, limited government, free markets, and peace. It's an honor to speak with you today about the affordability of electricity for Maryland families. In 2017, I was the lead author of the U.S. Department of Energy's staff report to the Secretary on electricity markets and reliability. 8 years ago, it was already clear that the electricity industry was not consumer friendly, and I worry that things have gotten worse. Perhaps the most important finding from that report was that the low prices in wholesale electricity markets from abundant shale gas and other things did not translate into lower retail prices. We called that the wholesale retail disconnect. It's a persistent blind spot in the world of electricity policy, and I'm glad to see Maryland lawmakers address it head on by focusing on ratepayers. Although I study the economics of electricity in my day job, first and foremost, I join you as a resident of the state of Maryland, trying to raise a family here on a tight budget. I have firsthand experience with the burden of high electricity prices. Don't ask me what my bill is, it's too much. That's why I'm so thankful to Senator Mary Beth Carrozza and her co-sponsors for introducing Senate Bill 675, which asks the Public Service Commission to study the full, and I agree that's the right emphasis, full costs and benefits of electricity resources and to recommend policy changes. Focusing on the full system cost of electricity is the right approach because we all pay that cost, whether it's through our utility bills or our taxes. I realize I'm late on time here. We have an opportunity to lead with a ratepayer first energy policy, and Senate Bill 675 shines a much needed light on what matters most to ratepayers, which is that electricity service is both reliable and affordable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Baker.
Hello, Ben Baker with the Maryland Public Service Commission, Chair, Vice Chairs, members of the committee. We do request a favorable report with amendments for Senate Bill 675. Our amendments that we request really focus on just ensuring we have flexibility with the study and to ensure that we're being neutral across all the fuel sources that we do study. We do have concerns about future costs, and we think that this study would help inform, I guess, what the different sources might cost in the future as we continue to have these policy discussions. And so this kind of study would help with having that discussion. It's also something that as we stand up the new IRP division that is contemplated in one of the bills that could be ongoing or something looked at them as well. So anyways, happy to take any questions, and thank you very much.
Take questions. We're going to start with Senator Augustine.
Thank you. First of all, Tammy, thank you so much. You've just been such an unbelievable partner.
Thank you.
On energy policy. You'll be missed. Wow, really, seriously. Ben,
Yes.
You get the report. What are you going to do with it?
So I view this as we are providing information to the decision. It's basically going to, I would say it's almost like a report for policymakers, decision makers in the state to kind of help understand what the cost of energy across certain resources will look like as we talk about which ones to pursue. So I think it's more of a saying, here's what different resources relative to Maryland, what they will cost. So I think certain studies like Lazard's, they're more state, they're more nationwide studies in general. So this is really just going to be an informational study. It does ask for us to make recommendations to you all. So we could work through if there's specific policies that you want us to focus on in that report. We can talk through which ones you would want us to opine on. But I view this as more of an informational report. I will say for some of the procurement bills that are out there, I'm not saying this study in particular, but making projections about what the future grid mix looks like will determine the economics of what we would do with some of those procurements. So I would say this bill is kind of, I would just say an info bill, or sorry, an informational report for policymakers.
When we are making choices and decisions, and we've empowered you guys to do that with some of the purchase power agreements and stuff like that, I mean, aren't you supposed to do that within the context of those things already? Isn't that already in your purview?
So when we're doing like a specific procurement, our so when we're doing a specific procurement, so that I would assume this would be part of, or maybe not this study, but projections about the future.
I don't see where it would be. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. I mean, the $500,000 that this is going to cost, where does that money come from?
So that would probably that would come out of our assessment. So via how basically paid through the ratepayer bill. Yes.
Okay.
So
all right. So just trying to understand what we get
when
we're spending money, when we're spending ratepayer money on certain things.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. But that's what we will be doing here.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, just, this is actually for maybe Senator Sergi, the question of is a good idea, didn't need a piece of legislation to do it. And it's sort of one question, feel free to respond. I think that's kind of, where Senator Augustine's maybe coming
I think, Mr. Chairman, one of the important parts of the bill as well is the very end that said that it was also include recommended policy changes to support the development of energy sources with the lowest cost and greatest benefits to the ratepayers of the state. So again, I think this is something that would help us in our decision makings. I mean, we've got major energy policy bills this session, as we always do. But when we're trying to address an energy crisis that we have in the state because we have to import so much electricity from other states, and we're looking now, can we try to find a way to solve some of that with in-state generation? I think while there are certain criteria that some people may or may not like, I think one thing that we can all agree upon is that we want to do it in the most cost-effective manner possible. And again, I think this type of analysis, when you're looking at the full system cost, is much more helpful than, dare I say, Department of Legislative Services providing a fiscal note on how a certain policy change is going to affect ratepayers.
Okay.
May I just make one last comment,
absolutely.
Mr. Chair, just because this is kind of near and dear. Back home with constituents, as we're moving forward with contemplating new energy policies, energy development, constituents want to know the true and full cost. And that's, that was the driving factor. And knowing that there are, that we can improve the capturing of the full cost is, I think, something that not only do we owe our constituents, but I believe that we as policymakers need that information so we can make good decisions moving forward.
Yes, there one follow-up from Senator Augustine.
So I am with you on that. I truly am. I'm asking Mr. Baker, the supply costs over the course of the last set of years, what has been sort of the trajectory on the supply side versus the trajectory on the distribution side, which I feel, what is that?
So supply's been up and down, and I think, so I would say usually it's safe to say what's happening with gas is kind of what's happening in the power markets. I would say still focus on the supply for a minute. Another spike that's coming this summer is going to be because of the capacity pricing
That's right,
issues.
but we haven't yet felt that.
And that, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, so I would say, like, we had some energy spikes a couple of years ago, and that was driven by the war in Ukraine and things that were happening in the fundamental, like, natural gas commodity markets. What's coming up is going to be more about actual steel in the ground to serve the need and the views of how reliable or not reliable that steel is, and also just attracting new ones as old ones retire. Distribution side, yes, it's been pretty, ever since the Tax Cuts and Job Acts, it's been basically a steady growth since then. So that one's been on a steady growth curve while supply has been bouncing around.
And when folks are asking questions about their current situation, right? Isn't significant a portion of that driven by the distribution side more so than driven by the supply side, although we are concerned about the supply side? I'm just talking about the underlying discussion of this bill. This is important. This is important. This is very important.
Right.
But I'm just saying the presentation of the bill and the purpose of the bill is a little bit different than the short-term stuff.
Right. So if we're talking about, so the immediate, what we've been hearing about all winter has been, the primary driver has been the fact that everyone's been using a lot more energy. The second driver, I think one of the main ones is distribution. On the gas side, it is also supply. So on the gas side, everything is up. On the electricity side, it has been usage, and then distribution, and then this summer we're going to see an increase in supply.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Nope.
Yeah, well, this topic's going to come up next week when we have a joint hearing, and I'm sure you'll be back testifying to this same topic next week. Additional questions for our two senators or for the panel? Yes, Senator Brooks.
Thanks. Yeah, Ben. Just for a question, on the, say, supply side, you're going to have volatility with that. The price is going to go up and down. And then, but on the distribution side, is that more like a arrow that keeps going up and up and up and up? So that's
That I mean, since I've been at the commission, that's been more. I mean, we had when there was a tax cut in 2017. We did lower rates for that. But since then, generally distribution rates have generally stayed the same or gone up. Right. Depending on which utilities we're talking about. It's not, there could be a decrease, but right now I think more signs are pointing towards there's a capital bias.
Because I too was looking at my bill, and I tell you, my distribution cost was twice that of my usage. So yeah.
You mean supply? Sorry.
My supply.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, let's go to Senator Hester next.
So many other charges.
On that distribution cost, do you happen to know, or could you find out, are the distribution costs in Maryland, are they going up faster than other states?
I would have to look into that.
That would be great. Thanks.
Okay, important topic. Any other questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, we do have one additional witness unfavorable, Alex Pavlak. Ms. Pavlak, why don't you come up? You're signed up unfavorable on this piece of legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you're on the 2-minute clock.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Pavlak, a PhD engineer from Severna Park and the chairman of the Future of Energy Initiative. I like this bill. the intent, addressing full system cost is exactly how you have to address the problem. A little bit of wind on an existing grid with lots of backup is a reasonable thing to do, but nobody's going to live off the grid with just a wind turbine. You have to look at the whole system and the cost of the whole system. What I don't like about the bill is it's a policy study. It's not an engineering study, and there's a better way to do this. The better way to do this is Senator Hester's integrated resource plan. The integrated resource plan is typically an engineering study that is out of the policy arena, and it's a more objective way to come to grips with the whole problem. Last night, I asked my group, how would you manage an integrated resource plan, or how should an integrated resource plan be managed? And I was rather startled by the response. Their experience is that it was uniform, it was the same by everyone, and it's keep the politics out of it. Use the politics to set a high-level goal, like net zero, and then let the technocrats deal with the whole system and how the costs fit together. That's basically my comments. I like the intent. I don't like the approach. Better approach is the IRP. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Pavlik. Questions for Mr. Pavlik? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 675. Okay, next move to Senator Karen Lewis Young on Senate Bill 853. I've got Don Butchko on the panel, Joanne Frederick, and Elizabeth Law. So if those three folks can come up, we can get started on Senate Bill 853.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair, members of EEE. Back here visiting again on a topic you're hearing a lot about, our demand for energy, how we get it, where we place it, how we do it efficiently, and how we do it in the most environmentally friendly manner possible. This past spring and summer, you probably heard of the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project. It is a 70-mile or a planned 70-mile transmission line that would go through Baltimore, Carroll, and Frederick County. And the conversation around that and the concern around that is very much what precipitated the bill that I have before you today. I have been speaking with a number of my colleagues during interim, and I spoke to the PSC as well as a variety of other entities that have impact on this decision before I decided to come forward with this bill. Not a complicated bill at all. Fundamentally, it only does three things. First of all, what it says is if there is going to be a transmission line, although I would hope that alternative technologies are consulted first, but should there be one, that an existing right-of-way should be considered first. So this requires the PSC to ensure that that consideration actually happened. What is a right-of-way? It establishes the right for a transmission line to pass through and operate on land they don't own. So if for some very legitimate reasons that is not feasible, then this bill, the second thing it does is say that the transmission line should be constructed within a quarter of a mile of that transmission line. You may recall that many of the citizen concerns regarding location was given that the plan was very close to farm lines, farmland, historic properties, residential communities, and it really created one of the largest citizen outbursts of concern that I have witnessed in my 11 sessions. So I mentioned that the third thing that it does is require a level of reporting and communication. I'm not going to go through all of the reporting requirements, but in particular, the communication from the very beginning and the involvement of the community is very critical. And my panel will be speaking to these things. Dominic Buchko will be talking to why it's important to have local government an important part of the process, and what are the issues that local government should have impact on. Elizabeth Law will be talking about the technological feasibility of this strategy. And Joanne Frederick will be talking about the critical importance of citizen involvement, communication, and participation. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and with that, I'll pass it on to my panel.
Okay, thank you. Don, why don't you go next? And each of you are going to be on the 2-minute clock.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dom with Mako here in support of Senate Bill 853. As the senator stated, Maryland is facing a historic number of challenges, particularly around energy, and the Piedmont Reliability Project clearly has our mutual constituents up in alarm right now. This piece of legislation is seeking to craft some balance between Maryland's energy demands, but also our environmental policies, specifically preservation. Since the 1960s, the state as well as the federal government and Maryland's counties have invested billions, with a B, billions, in land conservation. And this is land that we cannot get back. This is some of our most sensitive agricultural and environmentally sensitive areas. And again, billions of dollars. This bill is saying that due to technological advances, we really don't need to target that land for development anymore. We can reconductor, we can use existing transmission right-of-ways, et cetera. We can take areas that are already impacted that aren't within those right-of-ways, but we already kind of know what the results will be when we do the analysis. This is smart, common sense legislation. It seeks balance to Maryland's multiple goals, and counties strongly urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to our next witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Law. I'm a professional power engineer. I was a transmission planner for Con Edison of New York and worked 10 years for FERC in the Office of Electric Reliability. I applaud leadership's focus this season on our electric power issues. Seems like every bill has to do with what I used to do for a living. SB 853 dovetails with the Energy Resource Adequacy and Planning Act and calling for utilities to provide their power demand forecast and supply plans, known otherwise as Integrated Resource Plans, or IRPs. The utilities are full of engineers who know how their power works and where it's going. And you should listen to them, and you should talk with them. It would be just efficacious. SB 853 also reflects the Renewable Energy Certainty Act in calling for utilities to incorporate and interconnect solar power generation and battery storage. Direct commission involvement is required to coordinate. PJM does not consider socioeconomic impacts when it awards contracts. We must and can work beyond the siloed constraints and dictates of PJM by enhancing our distribution system. This requires input from the utilities. Commission involvement would accelerate these initiatives. For example, demand response contracts between utilities and customers reduce power consumption during high load periods. Florida, FPL, their contracts resulted in cancellation of a nuclear power plant, plus substations, plus transmission lines, resulting in huge savings for ratepayers. Utility scale batteries, getting better every day, store power to use at peak times. This reduces or eliminates the need for gas generator peakers. BJE, I've heard recently, in this room, was able to eliminate plans for a substation. Tier 1 renewable resource projects have been slow to reach their potential. I ask for a report of favorable with amendments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Frederick?
Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee, again, for the record, my name is Joanne Frederick, and I'm here to express strong support for Senate Bill 853. This bill is critical to protecting Maryland's communities, environment, and economy from unnecessary transmission expansion while ensuring better planning and oversight of our energy future. The MPRP was approved by PJM Interconnection before FERC Order 1920 took effect, meaning Maryland had no meaningful say in the project's planning or necessity. FERC Order 1920 now grants states a stronger voice in long-term transmission planning, requiring utilities to consider alternatives like grid-enhancing technologies and distributed energy. PJM awarded the MPRP just before the full adoption of FERC Order 1920, and with it implemented, Maryland could have demanded better solutions instead of being forced to accept PJM's decision. The MPRP is poised to cut through wetlands, forest, and farmlands, impacting 51.1 acres of wetlands, critical to water filtration and flood prevention, 101 stream crossings, increasing sedimentation and pollution risks, and it will destroy nearly 400 acres of forest, affecting biodiversity and carbon sequestration. These disturbances directly harm the Chesapeake Bay, which relies on Maryland's upstream ecosystems to filter pollutants. Unchecked deforestation and wetland destruction increase nitrogen and phosphorus runoff, exacerbating the bay's already critical water issues. Senate Bill 853 ensures new overhead transmission lines are only built when absolutely necessary, and it prioritizes existing infrastructure over reckless expansion. It also enhances state oversight and transparency, aligning Maryland with FERC Order 1920 to give our state more control over our energy future. I urge this committee to issue a favorable report on Senate Bill 853 to protect Maryland's land, waterways, and communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Senator Lewis Young or the three panelists? Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 853. And let's next go to Senator Hester on Senate Bill 867. And actually, maybe Dom, you could just stay there. We've got Greg Smith as part of your panel, Roger Austin.
Do you want me to be?
Dom's straight favorable. If you want to, he can.
Yeah.
If you wanna, yeah. Laura Nelson.
Bill ever. That's what I'm told.
Laura Nelson here. And actually, I see Secretary Wu here, or I'm not sure. You're here just for information purposes, but.
I'm favorable with amendments.
Okay, well then.
Come on up.
Then why don't you come up and join the table, and that will be a panel. And those are the witnesses on this bill. So, Senator Hester, why don't you lead off on Senate Bill 867?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Honorable EEE Committee. For the record, Senator Katie Fry Hester, here to present on Senate Bill 867. I will be somewhat brief because you heard a version of this bill about a month ago presented by the Secretary. Just to remind you, this bill is about filling the 10,000 some cybersecurity jobs that we currently have open in the state. The bill that this is similar to was the Department of Labor's bill, Senate Bill 241, which was heard on January 30th. Basically, the bill transfers the Cyber Maryland program from TEDCO to the Maryland Department of Labor. However, my bill was drafted about a month later, and I had the benefit of the Cyber Maryland strategy, which you'll hear more about. But I just wanted to add a little nuance to the bill to really ensure that the bill and the program focused on the results of that strategy. The strategy has 4 components. First, to equip every Marylander with foundational skills to grow the pipeline of potential cyber talent. Second, transforming post-secondary cybersecurity education. Third, expanding new pathways into cybersecurity careers beyond the traditional higher education. And fourth, strengthening our collaboration with local and federal governments. So you will see these goals reflected in the bill. The differences between this bill and the other one that you heard is basically that, as you may recall, in the governor's budget, there is existing funding for the Cyber Maryland program. And as drafted, I was highly prescriptive in how to spend that funding. The amendments that the Secretary will describe makes it slightly less specific, but does maintain a focus on the cybersecurity clinics, which are really necessary to both bridge the gap between education and theoretical application, while also helping some of our critical industries, which this committee has heard so much about. Industries like the water sector, the hospital sector, and also K through 12 education, and making sure that they are protected. So we do have a consensus amendment from TEDCO and the Department of Labor, which we have currently in drafting. And basically with that, I would ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 867 and turn it over to the chair of the board of the Cyber Maryland program, Roger Austin.
Okay, Mr. Austin, you can go next, and each of you will be on the up to 2-minute clock, okay?
Thank you, Senator Hester, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of Senate Bill 867, a crucial step forward for the cybersecurity workforce and economic future of Maryland. As chairman of the Cyber Maryland program, I've witnessed firsthand the incredible demand for skilled cyber workforce. Maryland, home of the National Security Agency, Cyber Command, and numerous federal agencies and private sector cybersecurity firms, must continue leading the nation in cybersecurity talent development. Yet, despite our strategic advantages, we face a significant workforce gap. The latest data estimates that over 24,000 cybersecurity jobs remain unfilled in Maryland. These are high-paying, recession-proof jobs that our state must work aggressively to fill. Senate Bill 867 directly addresses this challenge by refining the Cyber Maryland program to serve as a one-stop hub for employers, enhancing talent pipeline programs, and ensuring our workforce reflects our state. The economic impact of closing this workforce gap cannot be overstated. Cybersecurity professionals can earn an average salary exceeding $117,000 per year, driving economic growth and ensuring a strong tax base for Maryland. Furthermore, every cyber job filled means strengthening our national security and protecting businesses, hospitals, and local governments from costly cyber threats. Senate Bill 867 also prioritizes veterans transitioning into cyber careers and students at Maryland's community colleges. By supporting programs that invest in apprenticeships, K-12 cyber education, and cyber security clinics focused on critical infrastructure, this bill ensures that Maryland's cyber future is effective and sustainable. Members of the committee, Maryland must seize this moment. Senate Bill 867 is a smart investment in our workforce, our economy, and our security. I urge your favorable support of this legislation so that we can bridge the cybersecurity gap and empower a highly skilled workforce for the future.
Okay, Senator Hester, who would you like to go next?
Secretary, please.
Okay, Madam Secretary, you're next.
Thank you, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Portia Wu, and I'm Maryland's Labor Secretary, and I'm testifying in support with amendments of SB 867, which transfers the Cyber Maryland program from TEDCO to the Department of Labor. I want to thank Senator Hester for her leadership in shaping Maryland's cybersecurity strategy and guiding the Cyber Maryland program established through her legislation in 2023. As the senator noted, we had some amendments which we worked on together with the sponsor. Our initial bill was more bare bones, just shifting the program over. Senator Hester's amendment adopts many of the proposals from the soon-to-be published formally Talent Strategy Plan, and moving the program to the department will allow us to leverage our expertise and infrastructure to bring that plan to life. The other witnesses are talking about, and I've spoken before this committee about the need for more investment in cybersecurity workforce. The amendments we have proposed and are working on with Senator Hester are really to provide more flexibility. We appreciate the specificity of the strategies that she enumerated and completely agree those are important, but particularly in an uncertain budget climate, we just recommend a more flexible funding framework. Strict allocations to specific strategies might make it a little bit more difficult to pivot, and we want to make sure we're adapting to industry needs as well as, frankly, the fiscal and on-the-ground reality realities that we're seeing changing every day in the state. Additionally, we were concerned that relying on unspent funds from other programs might not provide the stable resources. As Senator Hester referenced, the governor's budget does include an investment in cybersecurity skills, and we feel like that is absolutely critical to the success of this program and, frankly, to our state's economic growth. So with that, I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, let's go next. You're up. Tell us your name.
Good afternoon, Chairman Feldman and Vice Chair Kagan and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Laura Nelson, and I serve as the President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Cryptologic Foundation. Thank you for this opportunity to express our strong support for Senate Bill 867, Cyber Maryland Program revisions. At NCF, we applaud the vision of the bill and are especially excited that the bill proposes a direct investment in K-12 cybersecurity education, including summer camps. As the CEO of the NCF, I lead an organization with a deep commitment to advancing cybersecurity education and workforce readiness. We've been on the front lines of the mission, offering programs that empower students and educators, foster innovation, and build pathways to cyber careers. Programs like our Cyber Chats podcast and our Outsmart Cyber Threats collection have already reached thousands of students and educators, inspiring a new generation to embrace cybersecurity as both a profession and personal responsibility. Our cybersecurity guidelines have equipped over 2,600 educators across the nation, and our programs are strategically designed to help young minds cultivate critical skills. They're making a tangible difference in closing workforce gaps right here in Maryland and across the country. These programs are built on years of an experience and national partnerships, and they can be transformative. Investing in education is not just an option, it is an imperative. Over the past 4 years, we have proudly collaborated with the General Assembly and the broader Maryland cybersecurity community to drive legislative success, including the creation of the Cyber Maryland program in 2023. I urge this committee to support Senate Bill 867 to ensure that Maryland continues to lead boldly in the face of today's cybersecurity challenges. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Puchko?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dom with Mako. I'm going to keep this very brief. This is a very, very good bill. It is really important for the future of Maryland's cybersecurity. We thank the senator for putting it in, and I refer you to our written testimony. We strongly urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Smith on the end there.
Thank you so much. My name is Greg Smith. I'm a 6-time cybersecurity CEO based here in Maryland. Today I run a nonprofit, which is an agent of the state called the Technology Advancement Center. The piece that I'd really like to touch on today is what we defined in this bill as clinics. Clinics are focused on our critical infrastructure, water, healthcare, the power grid, etc. We are owned today by our adversaries. And what I mean by owned is our adversaries are embedded into these systems. If we do not have enough workers to support these systems appropriately, we are in deep trouble as a state. We are in deep trouble as a country. We firmly support this bill, especially around adding critical infrastructure, cybersecurity professionals to support our state and to support our country. I support the DoD every single day in training workers at the federal level. We need to do this at the state level as well. We firmly support this bill. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Questions, starting with Senator Augustine, and then we'll go to Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator, for the bill. And where did the $3 million come from?
It was in the original.
Senator Hester, yeah, put that mic in front.
Oh, I think that one.
The $3 million was in the budget the governor introduced.
Okay, and so so it seems like it's not. It doesn't say it in here, but it says in the fiscal note the expectation that it will continue to be $3 million. Is that right?
That was not my intent.
It's not. Well, maybe I misread it.
Maybe Secretary Wu, do you have some input? Why don't you get that mic?
Yes. You know, the way the governor's budget has funds for Cyber Maryland. It's $3 million directly budgeted to the Department of Labor and $2 million in a dedicated purpose account as cyber workforce grants. And I think the $2 million in the dedicated purpose account, as you know, is often for a focused effort. I do think, obviously, there can be changes from year to year, but the understanding is there would be ongoing funding for Cyber Maryland, and in the governor's budget, that's proposed at around $3 million. I believe that is roughly also what might be available actually being transferred from TEDCO's budget, right? It's being transferred over from TEDCO to Department of Labor. I know there were some changes last year, so I don't know exactly how that budget has shaped up, but I think we developed that number in alignment with what had previously been budgeted or included for TEDCO.
Okay, because it says $3 million a year, every year for it's when, and then there's also a shall, which we've been getting away from shall language.
Yeah, so that is in the consensus amendment. It changes the shall to a may.
Okay.
And I believe the amendment says in the 2026 budget, up to $1 million for the clinics.
Okay.
And the rest is focused on these core areas of the strategy, but we're not being specific about how the Cyber Maryland board sits. The program has like 3 pieces. There's the board, the fund, and the program. And it's new to this committee, but it was heard a couple times, and you might have even been there in finance when it started 3 years ago. So it's a growing program, and I really appreciate the governor's support and the secretary's support.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And I don't see that, but I would be curious about the amendments. We have
Absolutely.
It's like such a struggle right now. We're really having to look at a lot of things and stuff. It's hard. So thank you.
I understand.
Okay, we'll go to Vice Chair Kagan next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Hester and Secretary Wu, for all of your work on these important issues. And the governor talks about the need to expand and to grow and to expand our workforce and stuff. So I think Dominic Butchko will be happy when I reference something that I heard and learned at a Maryland Association of Counties conference when I was moderating a panel on cyber and technology, and people started talking about summer camps for girls at the youngest ages and how it got them jazzed and inspired to then continue down that road. So I see that summer camps are included here, which is great. So just quick thumbs up on that. I don't know if this is a question for you, Senator Hester, or for Secretary Wu or someone else. This is all newer than your work group. Is there any lane, is there any effort to reach out to our constituents and neighbors who have been laid off, who have this mad skills that we want in our economy here in Maryland, former federal employees?
Senator, I'm happy to take that. Senator, as I referenced, and thank you for the question, Madam Vice Chair, I think definitely cybersecurity is one of those areas where we see potential for that work. There is work for individuals who already have perhaps an IT background or a help desk background, as well as individuals who may be interested in a career path change. We are working expeditiously and hope to get the budget and staffing in the next fiscal year to really be able to continue that work. And absolutely that will be a focus, because we know these jobs, I think the median salary in Maryland for a cybersecurity job is about $130,000 a year. So they are good paying jobs, they're skilled jobs, they're portable jobs. They can really support people and be a career pathway for life. And getting back to Senator Augustine's question, I understand the budgetary concerns, but I think we also view this investment as something in this program, at whatever level the General Assembly deems appropriate. We think it should be a robust level. It's necessary to keep the work ongoing, but we absolutely understand we need to leverage other resources that are out there as well to make sure that happens.
Madam Secretary, as the senator for the high-tech corridor here, up to 70, and having the new CEO of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce as my shadow today, I can say that we are very interested in making sure that these jobs either come to Maryland or stay in Maryland. So thank you both. Thank you all.
Okay, additional questions for the panel? Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 867. Before we go to Senator West's 5 bills, I would like to get the second Hester bill in here if your witnesses are here. Senate Bill 908, and then we'll take Senator West after that and his bills. I've got, again, we're on Senate Bill 908, and I'm looking at Josh Talkin, Robin Dutta, Dr. Alfred Bartlett, and David Cathan, Bill Fields, and Katie Meadows. So there's 6 witnesses. And Senator Hester, this might be one because you've got 6 panelists. Maybe you want to present the bill from the podium?
Sure. Thank you.
And we've got 6 seats and 6 witnesses. I'm sorry?
We might have one more that's missing.
Well, I've got Juliana DeLauro, but she wasn't, she's favorable. I mean, you didn't designate her as a part of your panel, but she's welcome to testify right after these folks, okay? So we've got her on the list as well. Okay, so Senator Hester, why don't you start, and we're on Senate Bill 908.
Thank you, Chair Feldman, members of the EEE Committee, for your consideration of Senate Bill 908, the Affordable Grid Act. This is a critical component of Maryland's energy crisis, responding to Maryland's energy crisis through long-term fixes to our distribution system planning process. As this committee knows, our electricity distribution system was designed over a century ago for a one-way flow of power from centralized generation sources to homes and businesses. However, today's landscape has dramatically changed, with modern technologies enabling bidirectional energy flow, demand response, and distributed energy resources, such as battery storage and solar power. Unfortunately, utility planning methods have not kept pace. Traditional forecasting approaches rely on historical trends, often underestimating the rapid adoption of clean energy technologies. This leads to costly, unnecessary infrastructure investments instead of cost-effective alternatives that better serve our ratepayers. Without modernized distribution planning, we risk inefficiencies, which will increase costs for consumers and hinder our ability to meet these targets. A study commissioned by Atlantic City Electric in 2022 and conducted by the Bratto Group found that a $347 million investment in modernized grid planning would yield nearly $1 billion in value over 2 decades. This model of cost-effective investment is exactly what the Affordable Grid Act will establish here in the state of Maryland. Senate Bill 908 requires utilities to submit a comprehensive distribution system plan every 3 years to the Public Service Commission that will protect ratepayers, increase grid resiliency. These plans must require detailed system planning, track progress, engage stakeholders, and create data transparency. Additionally, the bill mandates that the utilities assist hosting and load-serving capacity for DERs, such as electric vehicles, battery storage, and solar, that the PSC creates regulations for standardized reporting metrics and a framework for data sharing, and utilities coordinate their planning efforts between gas and electric distribution to avoid redundant investments and improve decarbonization strategies. This bill is not without precedent. Research shows that many other states are moving towards more comprehensive distribution system planning. California, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New York, and Michigan require their public utility commissions to approve electric utilities distribution system plans. 6 states require utilities to include building electrification and electric vehicle charging in load forecasts. And 5 states require utilities to forecast the potential utilization and benefit of energy-saving tools, including demand response, energy storage, demand flexibility, and/or managed EV charging. If all of this seems slightly familiar to this committee, it should. When we set ambitious clean energy goals through the Climate Solutions Now Act, we tasked the PSC with adopting regulations on electric distribution planning by December 31st of 2025, which is this year. However, as you will see in the attached timeline in my testimony, key issues remain unresolved. The PSC has indicated it will not exercise their right to approve or reject distribution plans. Further, the work group process has been hindered by consensus requirements that have diluted the strongest provisions, and as a result, stakeholders, including those involved in drafting this legislation, have little confidence, unfortunately, that the PSC will finalize regulations with enough enforcement power to maximize the cost savings and the grid reliability we are talking about today. Therefore, Senate Bill 908 codifies key items from the work group and builds upon them to provide solutions for the partial and non-consensus issues that would otherwise go unaddressed. This bill ensures Maryland's electric utilities take a proactive approach to distribution system planning, aligning it with our state's clean energy policies and evolving demand. Colleagues, this bill will protect ratepayers by ensuring utility investments reflect actual energy demand rather than outdated projections that lead to unnecessary spending. It will improve cost effectiveness by prioritizing innovative solutions over expensive infrastructure expansion. I do want to highlight, before I turn over to my panel, that IBEW Local 410 has submitted written testimony in favor of this bill with 2 strengthening amendments. They could not be here today in person, but IBEW represents approximately 1,500 BGE employees. This bill is a result of rigorous collaboration between my office and work group participants and stakeholders. It provides a clear framework for modernizing Maryland's distribution planning process and ensuring our grid is prepared for the clean energy transition while keeping costs low for ratepayers. And for these reasons, I would respectfully urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 908.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Hester. Why don't we just go down the table? Sir, why don't you lead off and give us your name, and each of you will be on the up to 2-minute clock, okay?
Thank you, Chairman Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members. I'm Dr. Alfred Bartlett, representing Physicians for Social Responsibility, speaking in support of SB 908. I joined the PSC's Distribution System Planning Work Group in 2021 when my work with PSC on community solar found that limited capacity to connect projects to the distribution grid was a major constraint. The same is true for the other things we need to do to electrify and move off fossil fuels, like battery storage, EV charging, and virtual power plants. It's not just capacity. The modern grid we need has to be smart, to use communication and control technologies and AI to balance input from distributed generation and batteries with demand, using the lowest cost electricity. Smart distribution systems also increase reliability, reduce outages, and can avoid costly infrastructure. This lets us both electrify and decarbonize while saving money. One example is the Vermont Green Mountain Power virtual power plant. 2,500 customers participate using home-based batteries to store power when demand or prices are low and use it or sell it when they're high. The program saves their ratepayers about $3 million a year, and 78% of their electricity is renewable. This kind of program is only possible with the smart grid management capabilities of a modern distribution grid. To move from the grid we have to the modern grid we need starts with good and modernized planning. That's what SB 908 does, and why we request a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's go to the next one. We'll just go, okay, Ms. Tolkien, you want to go next? Okay.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Josh Tolkien on behalf of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club and our 70,000 members and supporters. We urge a favorable report. Sierra Club has been involved in many Public Service Commission proceedings for the last 20 years, including the start of PC 44, the Grid of the Future proceeding, as well as the Interconnection Working Group. We are thrilled to be represented by David Cathan, an industry expert in this field, and are excited to be able to have him deliver our testimony today.
Okay, thank you. Sir?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members. My name is David Cathan. I'm a volunteer with the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club. Since September 2023, I've been an active member of the Distribution System Planning Work Group. By way of background, I've devoted 40 years of my career to electric policy and markets and retired as a senior economist at FERC, where I led FERC's efforts on demand response and distributed energy resources. Active PSC involvement in overseeing distribution system planning is essential and worth the estimated cost. Without the enactment of the Affordable Grid Act that directs that the PSC approve distribution system plans, planning processes will not be meaningful. Without PSC approval, the planning regulations under the development will have no real teeth, and the PSC will lack focus on distribution system planning. And as the Senator reports, Commission oversight and approval is not new. There are several other states who have that approval process. The Sierra Club is fully aware of the $500,000 estimated cost in the fiscal note to implement the act. While this sounds high, especially given the current tight state budget, the costs will not be paid out of the Maryland General Fund. They will be raised by an assessment on utilities and spread among all utility ratepayers. Individual ratepayer impact will be minimal. Moreover, as Al just reported, these costs will be more than paid back through savings associated with optimized infrastructure spending, adoption of cost-effective and modern technology, and removal of unnecessary spending the utilities would otherwise make. In conclusion, Sierra Club urges a favorable report on SB 908. This legislation is urgently needed to bring Maryland's electric industry into the 21st century and is well worth the investment in staff and costs at the PSC to implement. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go to the other side of the table.
Exactly 2 minutes.
Katie Mettle, why don't you go next?
I'm just marveling at David's time management skills. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and esteemed members of EEE. For the record, my name is Katie Mettle. I am the Maryland Policy Principal for Advanced Energy United. We are an industry association that represents the full suite of technologies that are building the clean energy economy. Bringing new generation online, whether in the form of utility-scale generation or customer-sided distributed energy resources like rooftop solar, requires us to expand or update our existing transmission and distribution infrastructure. SB 908 is about making sure that, as far as the distribution system is concerned, expansions and upgrades are made as cost-effectively as possible while taking advantage of grid modernizing technologies. This will allow savings to get passed on to ratepayers, improve the grid's reliability, and reduce demand during peak times. We can do this with accurate, adequate, data-driven distribution system planning. Although there are several differences between the PSC's Distribution System Planning Workgroup's draft regulations and the Affordable Grid Act, I want to highlight the most important one for you, that the PSC approved the utilities distribution system plans. 6 states, California, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New York, and Michigan, require their respective public service commissions to approve their electric utilities distribution system plans. I want to give you an example of how the kind of distribution system planning that is outlined in SB 908 can save ratepayers money. To build on the example that Senator Hester brought up, in 2022, Atlantic City Electric, an Exelon-owned utility, commissioned a cost-benefit analysis of a proposed portfolio of distribution system projects. Although the project portfolio and cost-benefit analyses were not identical to what is spelled out in this bill, they were substantially similar. The project spanned 5 categories: targeted reliability improvements, smart technology upgrades, infrastructure renewals, DER enablements, and substation improvements. The analysis projected that the $345.7 million of investments over 4 years would lead to an estimated return value of $939 million over 20 years, which included fewer power outages, less demand on the grid, and also less infrastructure build out. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to go to Mr. Fields next.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. William Fields for the Office of People's Counsel. OPC supports Senate Bill 908 to ensure Maryland's electric distribution system is modernized efficiently and affordably. While the Public Service Commission initiated a work group in 2021 and issued an order last summer addressing many distribution system planning issues, critical gaps remain. The current process lacks robust oversight and transparency. Utilities still largely self-govern their distribution planning, deciding unilaterally if, when, and how investments are made. This trust us approach does not provide the accountability needed to ensure that grid investments are both prudent and cost-effective. Senate Bill 908 fills these gaps by 1, requiring mandatory 3-year distribution system plans with PSC approval, shifting from a voluntary process to a regulated framework. 2, implementing robust performance metrics to ensure grid reliability, clean energy integration, and cost control. 3, establishing transparent stakeholder engagement, including public comment opportunities. 4, introducing a data-driven planning framework to improve forecasting and promote non-wire solutions as lower-cost alternatives. And 5, mandating coordination between electric and gas utilities to align with state climate and equity goals. Without these reforms, utilities will continue to plan their distribution system investments on their own terms, risking unnecessary costs to ratepayers and missed opportunities for cleaner, cheaper energy solutions. Senate Bill 908 is essential to assure that Maryland's grid modernization advances with accountability, affordability, and equity at its core. OPC respectfully requests a favorable report on Senate Bill 908. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Okay, Mr. Dutta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Robin Dudd. I'm the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association. We represent solar companies of all shapes and sizes across Maryland, D.C., and Virginia, here favorable on SB 908. In order to not repeat what my fellow panelists have said, I'd just like to turn and make this concrete. When, historically in 20th century grid, there's always been generation and consumption. With this suite of advanced energy technologies that now exist and are much more mature, whether that's rooftop solar, but also smart appliances, smart thermostats, we now have this new component, which is load flexibility. Consumers don't just take the energy, they don't just consume it. Their homes now are some form of smart homes. That's increasingly every home, every building has an increasing ability to shape how their load how their energy is being drawn from the grid. And when you have rooftop solar and storage solutions, you also have the ability to source your own energy yourself. And those technologies can be utilized also for the benefit of the grid. With the distribution system planning processes envisioned in this bill, it also then asks the more granular questions. How can these types of technologies and solutions be deployed in order to reduce grid strain, in order to reduce peak demand in a way that is beneficial for the entire grid, beneficial for the utility, beneficial for rates? And I think the best way to articulate it is when looking at a single home. If it has rooftop solar, if it has the suite of advanced energy technologies, it can lower its own peak demand without reducing the homeowner's ability to be consuming electricity. It's not taking service away, but it's helping the grid, much in the way that industrial demand response does. And if we can do that from 1 and 1,000 and 10,000 homes, then that's beneficial for the grid and can delay or even avoid new grid infrastructure, saving everyone money. We urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have one final witness on this bill in the middle, Juliana DeLauro.
Thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify in support of Maryland's Affordable Grid Act. My name is Juliana Di Lauro. I'm the Associate Director of Community Engagement at the Institute of Market Transformation. We are a national nonprofit that advises all the states and jurisdictions that have passed a building performance standard or are considering it, including Maryland Department of Environment and Montgomery County. The Affordable Grid Act represents an important step towards modernizing Maryland's electric grid infrastructure while ensuring cost-effective planning that benefits ratepayers. Distribution system planning directly impacts building owners' ability to electrify their buildings and add distributed energy resources like solar and storage. The requirements in SB 908 for utilities to coordinate with gas companies on the decarb planning and identify locations for electrification will help building owners make informed decisions about equipment upgrades and electrification investments. Based on our experience working with other states and building decarbonization policies, we have observed that the improved distribution system planning transparency can provide valuable data to inform building electrification efforts. We appreciate that the bill requires utilities to coordinate planning between gas and electric systems, which is critical for managing the transition of buildings away from the fossil fuels. This coordination will help prevent both overbuilding and underbuilding of infrastructure as buildings electrify. We support the overall goals and approach of SB 908 and encourage the committee to ensure the final bill maintains strong requirements for managing stakeholder engagement that gives building owners and operators a voice in planning decisions that affect their properties, coordination between gas and electric utilities on electrification planning, clear metrics and oversight to ensure utilities follow through on identified non-wires alternatives, transparency and hosting capacity analysis to help building owners understand grid constraints. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input on this important legislation. We look forward to coordinating, and we advise for a favorable report.
Okay, thank you to the entire panel. Questions? Senator Augustine.
Mr. Chair, Senator, you mentioned other states who have gone this route of regulated DSP, right? Yeah. Do we have, can you, not today, but can we just have sort of the, try to quantify the benefit, I guess, yeah, of that approach, so that we can really be able to say, if it's possible, that we can then say, all right, yeah, this is where and how through using this mechanism, because obviously the commission has chosen a different approach. I mean, it's not that they're not doing it, but they've chosen a little bit of a different approach. But that this approach has already demonstrated some financial benefit as well. Like I know we have the other parts too, right? But just that I ask about that too.
Absolutely. We have several examples, and I'd be happy to walk through them offline with you. Thank you for the question, Senator, and thank you for your leadership in this area as well.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel or for the sponsor? Seeing none, that concludes the bill here on Senate Bill 908. And now we're going to go to Senator West for several bills.
Thank you so much.
Senator, we're going to start off with, just in the sequence that I have here, Senate Bill 950. And I've got Joanne Frederick and is alone favorable, and then Alex Pavlak. Is Pavlak still here?
I have him on here. So I think it might be.
Okay, Alex, why don't you come on up? And we're on Senate Bill 950.
Actually, Mr. Chair, if possible, I've prepared my testimony so it piggybacks on the prior testimony for the prior bills.
Okay.
If it would be possible, I was set to start with 952.
Sure.
If I do that, then.
No, that's fine. It's your call. So let's start instead with Senate Bill 952, and we've got Joanne Frederick. And Mr. Pavlak, you're not signed up on this bill, so why don't you, it's Joanne Frederick and Patrick Welch up here on Senate Bill 952. So Senator, you can start with 952, and I'll let you, whatever sequence you want to go, we'll go with your
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I've asked my aide, Alex Harlan, to come because I'm all thumbs when it comes to technology.
Okay, well, we'll load up your, whatever you're loading up here.
He's going to advance slides,
Gotcha.
but the slides actually don't start until the third bill, so you can look at this slide and internalize it for two bills.
Okay. It's all to get good. So why don't you start on 952?
I will. And I'm hesitant to trespass too much on the committee's time. I want to tell you in advance, the first three bills have rather lengthy testimony. The last two bills are going to go quickly. So anticipate that at the end, it's going to go whoop, whoop, and done. All right, with that, it's a pleasure to be here to present Senate Bill 952. As the members of this committee are well aware, last winter, PJM Interconnection signed a $424 million contract with PSEG, a utility based in central New Jersey, to construct a 70-mile, 500-kilovolt electricity transmission line from northeast Baltimore County to a small town located on the Maryland shore of the Potomac River in southern Frederick County called Point of Rocks. I've never been to Point of Rocks. I understand it's a very attractive place, but also very small. PSEG stands to realize very significant profits on account of this contract. This contract was signed despite the fact that there had been no opportunity at all for citizens or elected officials in Maryland to comment on the advisability of such a transmission line. So the contract was signed, that has precipitated all the controversy, was signed on day one. All of the anguish and agony that it precipitated occurred after the deal was done and after PSEG was legally committed to execute its contract. When word about the line hit the street, the residents of impacted communities in Baltimore, Carroll, and Frederick counties erupted in anger. Nothing remotely approaching this has happened during my 11 years in public life. To illustrate the magnitude of the fury, last summer during the week immediately preceding Labor Day, the last week of the summer, and the first week of the school year, a very hard week to persuade people to leave their homes during the evening, I attended two public meetings in my legislative district. The first occurred on Wednesday night at the Hereford High School. The huge high school auditorium was packed with angry citizens, and for hours they vented at the impassive PSEG representatives. I say impassive because PSEG had its $424 million contract in hand and was merely going through the pretense of listening to the sobs and shouts of the audience attendees. It had no interest in considering alternatives to the transmission line that its contract called for it to build. The following evening, there was a far greater turnout at the Carroll County Agricultural Center in Westminster. Well over 1,000 citizens spent the evening expressing their fury at the plan for the transmission line. So many speakers appealed for alternatives to the proposed transmission line, but PSEG is uninterested in considering alternatives. This bill, Senate Bill 952, requires that such alternatives be analyzed and seriously considered before any transmission line is approved. Under the current Maryland law, unless a certificate of public convenience and necessity for construction is first obtained from the Public Service Commission, an organization may not begin construction of an overhead transmission line that's designed to carry a voltage in excess of 69,000 volts or exercise a right of condemnation in order to proceed with the construction. However, a person that has received a certificate of public convenience and necessity from the PSC for the construction of an overhead transmission line may acquire by condemnation, in accordance with Title 12 of the Real Property Article, any property or right necessary for the construction or maintenance of the line. The Public Service Commission must take final action on a certificate of public convenience and necessity application only after due consideration of various factors specified by statute. For example, it's required to consider the recommendations of the governing body of each county or municipality in which any portion of the project is proposed to be located. It must consider the effect of the project on various aspects of the state infrastructure, economy, and environment. Senate Bill 952 adds to this list the additional requirements that before taking final action on a certificate of public convenience and necessity for the construction of an overhead transmission line, the PSC must give due consideration to the use of what are called grid enhancing technologies, which are known in the industry as GETs, as an alternative to construction of the transmission line. These technologies include infrastructure, hardware, or software that increases the capacity, efficiency, reliability, or resilience of new or existing transmission lines, as well as high-performance conductors and storage used as transmission. There are other grid-enhancing technologies, including sensors, dynamic line ratings, advanced power flow control devices, and analytic control tools that can increase line capacity and throughput based on real-time conditions. None of these alternatives were ever considered in this case because, once again, on day one, PSEG was tendered a $424 million contract to construct the proposed line. Another alternative to the 70-mile swath of destruction that would occur if the proposed line were to receive approval to move forward would be to construct transmission lines paralleling highways. A 2022 81-page Minnesota study found that underground transmission in existing transportation rights-of-way, which is known as longitudinal siting, can be built at a cost comparable on a capacity basis to above-ground transmission. 4 states have laws on the books prioritizing transmission longitudinal siting with existing highway rights-of-way. This alternative seems not to have been considered in this case. In addition, under Senate Bill 952, the PSC will be required to consider alternative routings, technologies, or modifications to one or more existing electrical distribution systems in the state that could avoid the need for the transmission line. Let me proffer one possible alternative routing that should be considered in this case. I'm not going to go through all the details of it. It's in my written testimony. But essentially, there are existing transmission lines all along the way except for a short stretch in the middle of the current proposed routing. 90% of the routing could be avoided, the construction of a new line could be avoided by using these existing lines. And the process is called reconductoring. The owner would use modern technology in order to greatly increase its carrying capacity of electricity in the existing transmission lines. In some cases, the carrying capacity of old lines can be doubled through reconductoring. This is possible in this case with only a small amount of new construction required in the center in northwestern Carroll County. Senate Bill 952 also provides that an applicant for a certificate of public convenience and necessity for the construction of an overhead line must include all of this information in its application in order to assist the PSC in its review. Notably, even though the PSEG has already filed its application for the controversial 70-mile new transmission line, this bill would nonetheless require the PSC to consider all of the gets factors as well as the possible alternative routings before it makes any decision about issuing a certificate of public convenience and necessity. Therefore, if this bill is passed, it will apply to PSEG's current application as well as all future applications for new overhead transmission lines. And finally, and significantly, Delegate Charkoudian filed a very similar bill in the House of Delegates. That would be House Bill 829. House Bill 829 is so close in concept and drafting to this bill that I've had an amendment prepared that would totally replace this bill with the language in Delegate Charkoudian's bill. Now, she added some amendments this week to her bill, and you have her to my proposed amendment, importing Delegate Charkoudian's bill in place of this bill, you will find her amendments. So if you were to pass Delegate Charkoudian's bill in place of my bill here, the language of the bill that you would pass would be identical to the language of the bill being considered in the House of Delegates. I hold no pride of authorship of the language in Senate Bill 952. And if it would facilitate the enactment of this legislation, I would be pleased if the committee decided to adopt the amendment, completely substitute Delegate Charkoudian's language for my language, and then were to pass the bill in that form. I think it's so important this bill pass. And Delegate Charkoudian and I talked about this. She asked me if I would be willing to do it. I took a look at her language and I said, fine, let's go that direction if it facilitates passage of the bill. So I'll just conclude by saying those with considerable expertise in the energy space have told me that the current proposed transmission line is just the tip of the iceberg, and that more such proposed transmission lines are just around the corner. The enactment of this bill will help to ensure that Maryland is implementing the most cost-effective and efficient means of providing sufficient power to meet our growing demands. I appreciate the committee's consideration of the bill, and after Joanne Frederick, who's sitting next to me, speaks, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Ms. Frederick.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Again, Joanne Frederick represents Stop MPRP. I'm proudly representing about 12,000 of those angry Marylanders who spoke out in opposition to Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project. I'm here to speak in strong support of Senate Bill 952 as amended and ask for a favorable report. Right now, according to the Department of Energy, our electric grid is only running at 50% of its capacity, yet utilities continue to push for costly land-intensive new transmission lines instead of optimizing what we already have. This isn't about reliability, it's about profits over common sense. Under current regulations, utilities make a guaranteed rate of return on new transmission projects, but they don't get the same financial benefit from modernizing existing lines. That's why they prefer expensive land-consuming projects that increase costs for ratepayers and disrupt communities. Senate Bill 952 changes that. It requires the PSC to fully evaluate grid-enhancing technologies like high-performance conductors and storage solutions before approving new transmission lines. These upgrades can boost grid capacity, reduce cost, and protect Maryland's land and environment without unnecessary expansion. This bill is fiscally responsible, technology-driven, and pro-consumer. It helps us keep energy costs down, prevents unnecessary land use, and modernizes our grid for the future. I urge the committee to vote in favor of Senate Bill 952 as amended and ensure Maryland prioritizes efficiency over corporate profits.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frederick. Ms. Welch.
Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to provide testimony on this matter today. My name is Patrick Welch. I'm an energy market professional representing the energy artisans in support of Senate Bill 952. By way of background, the energy artisans provide a wide range of advisory, management, and support services for load and generation entities across the United States, with specific expertise in both the PJM interconnection as well as in Maryland. We are based in Ellicott City, with the majority of our members and partners residing in Maryland. In short, we are close to the impacts of energy policy for the state, both professionally and personally. My work revolves around the development, operation, and ownership of electric generating assets. I'm a builder of infrastructure. It's with this lens that I evaluate the effectiveness of practices, codes, and regulations that contribute to a growing economy. As my written testimony mentions and has been explored by the PSC and others, Maryland is deficient in energy generation resources to meet demand. Additional transmission to increase grid capacity and improve siting availability is a critical aspect of grid connecting new generating resources. When I reflect on the terms convenience and necessity with regard to transmission, I do so as both a builder and a consumer. The current CPCN process for transmission projects asks the applicant to consider alternative routes, including estimated capital and operating expenses. To a reasonable extent, I agree this evaluation satisfies a Marylander's concern regarding property impact. However, we must also consider the efficiency of such project. Due to the capital and planning nature of transmission projects, grid-enhancing technologies and distributed generation often provide a less capital-intensive and swifter planning alternative to large transmission. I provided studies and initiatives that speak to this in my written testimony. Senate Bill 952 considers that these alternatives exist relative to the convenience and necessity of larger transmission projects, and in doing so should satisfy a Marylander's concern in a project's efficiency. For these reasons, Senate Bill 952 has the support of the energy artisans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Senator West or the panel? We're going to start with Senator Brooks.
Senator West.
Yes.
Thanks for the bill. Yeah. Quick question. Does PSEG have a right-of-way coming through the state of Maryland?
Does it have a right-of-way? Not now. They don't own any land in Maryland at all.
Right.
So that once they get the certificate of convenience and necessity, if they get it, they will have the right through eminent domain to acquire whatever land they need.
So that means that they would not have been a candidate for that particular project based with this bill, right? Because you're saying they would have to use, you want them to use GETS, grid enhancement technologies and all of that prior to coming through.
Yeah, I think that well, if the PJM should have used GETS when deciding whether or not we need a new transmission line.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they should have taken, under the circumstances, they should have taken bids from all the possible providers of the additional capacity. They didn't do that. They simply signed a contract with PSEG to build a brand new line.
Right.
So the existing people who could have provided enhancement were not part of the bidding process.
Right. Yeah. You're answering my question. Good. That's
Thanks.
exactly.
Sure.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah.
Okay. Additional questions for the sponsor or the two witnesses? Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 952. Senator West, which one would you like to go to next?
So next, let's go to Bill 955.
Okay. We are going to go to Senate Bill 955, and Ms. Frederick, you can stay right there, and then we do have one virtual witness, Harris Eisenstein. Is Mr. Eisenstein in? Okay, so we do have a virtual witness. So Senator West, why don't you lead off on Senate Bill 955?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be here to present Senate Bill 955. I've done an awful lot of work for the last 8 months on these issues, and you're going to hear in this testimony and in the next bill some information about that I uncovered during the course of my work. In my testimony on the last bill, I described the anguish and fury being expressed by thousands of Maryland families about the proposed 70-mile electrical transmission line. I specifically described the scenes at 2 public meetings that occurred last summer during the week immediately prior to Labor Day. Many more such public meetings have been held in connection with the proposed line, and it would be hard to overstate what happened at these meetings. Screaming, yelling, incipient physical altercations. These folks are facing the destruction of their lives and livelihoods, and to say that they're upset would be the understatement of the year. This bill is designed to, in some small measure, ameliorate the damage that will be inflicted on the infected property owners if the PSC should decide to approve the pending application of PSEG for a certificate of convenience and necessity. Before I describe the 3 components of this bill, permit me to explain why the fury of the residents along the 70-mile length of the proposed transmission line is specially pronounced. As of last November, Loudoun County, Virginia, which lies just on the south side of the Potomac River from the proposed terminus of the new transmission line in Point of Rocks, Maryland, was home to about 200 data centers, more than any other community on the face of the planet. That represents over a 230% increase in data centers in Loudoun County in the past 5 years alone. And in the pipeline are so many more data centers that by the time they are completed, the number of data centers in Loudoun County, Virginia, will have doubled to over 400 data centers. As a consequence, Loudoun County currently hosts 65% of the world's internet traffic. Imagine that. 65% of the world's internet traffic goes through Loudoun County, Virginia, because of these data centers. Each data center uses as much electricity as a small city. That means that Loudoun County is glomming up unimaginably massive amounts of electricity. Although the local utility in Loudoun County, which is Dominion Energy, is required by Virginia law to provide power to every customer it serves, it has failed in its assigned task. The Loudoun County data centers desperately need a vast amount of power, but Dominion can't provide it to them. That's where this proposed 70-mile transmission line across Maryland comes in. The proposed new transmission line would take electricity generated at the Peach Bottom Nuclear Power Plant just over the Pennsylvania line and transmit it from the northeast corner of Baltimore County across northern Baltimore County into northern Carroll County and then southwest across Carroll County into eastern Frederick County, terminating in Point of Rocks on the Potomac River. Why Point of Rocks? Well, there is an existing transmission line starting at Point of Rocks, which crosses the Potomac River and then goes directly to the heart of Loudoun County, where all those data centers are located. PSEG claims that Maryland will benefit from the proposed new line, but note that the proposed line does not go to a part of Maryland where electricity is in demand. The line doesn't go anywhere near Baltimore City or Central Maryland or the Washington, D.C. area counties. Rather, it goes to a tiny town named Point of Rocks, which just happens to be at the end of a transmission line going directly to the center of Loudoun County, Virginia. So none of the electricity delivered to Point of Rocks, which, by the way, needs no electricity, will be used in Maryland. It will all be delivered to Loudoun County, Virginia. The new transmission line will therefore be the equivalent of a 70-mile extension cord, delivering electricity from Maryland to Point of Rocks and then into Loudoun County, Virginia. All of the benefits of the proposed new transmission line will occur in Virginia. The vast data center complex being developed there will generate innumerable jobs and collateral economic development, but in Virginia, not in Maryland. Those employees will pay Virginia income taxes and property taxes. The data center owners are anticipated to pay $895 million in real and personal property taxes to Loudoun County, Virginia in this fiscal year, a county in which the entire operating budget this year is anticipated to be only $949 million. So local tax rates will be very low in Loudoun County, Virginia, while the economy of Loudoun County will grow robustly. By contrast, Maryland will suffer all of the deleterious consequences associated with the new transmission line and will derive no benefits from it at all. That is why the residents whose property in Maryland will be taken away from them if the transmission line is approved are so upset. It would be one thing if the new line were delivering electricity that they need and would improve their standard of living. But the new line will only bring them misery and destroy their lives while enhancing the economy of Loudoun County, Virginia, a place where the local utility is defying Virginia law and not generating the electricity needed to run the data centers. Our Maryland residents correctly apprehend that they are being sold down the river by PJM and PSEG in order to make the residents of another state prosperous. They are most profoundly upset. Senate Bill 955 is intended to help them out and to help out all those in the future whose homes and properties are in the path of transmission lines as yet unannounced. It has three components. First, much of the land that will be the subject of eminent domain has been voluntarily placed into permanent conservation easements and preservation easements by its owners in order to assure that it will remain forever protected against development. These owners movingly foresee that the proposed transmission line will result in the clear-cutting of forests, the destruction of ground cover, and the elimination of wildlife. The Chesapeake Legal Alliance and Blue Water Baltimore have issued a letter saying that the line will impact nearly 100 rivers and streams, 30 riparian wetlands, and 70 other federally identified wetlands. To lose these vital, permanently protected lands would be heartrending. And the perverse fact is that our eminent domain laws actually encourage PSEG to route the new transmission line through these protected lands because they have no development value and consequently can be acquired cheaply, far more cheaply than nearby land that could be developed. Senate Bill 955 prohibits a developer of new electrical transmission lines from exercising a right of condemnation to acquire property encumbered by a conservation easement. In this case, PSEG would have to route its proposed transmission line around these lands of paramount environmental importance. Second, while Maryland law currently provides for compensation to a property owner whose land is the subject of an eminent domain proceeding, it offers no protection at all for adjacent property owners whose land is adversely affected by the use of the acquired land. In this case, how about a next-door neighbor whose home is just 50 feet away from the property line of the land being acquired, and who will literally be living in the shadow of a giant steel tower bearing cables conducting massive amounts of electricity across the landscape? Imagine the depreciation in the value of that neighboring property once that tower looms over the house and the children who are part of that family are forced to play their games in the shadow of the industrial tower. Senate Bill 955 provides that an owner of land located within 500 feet of the property taken by eminent domain for an overhead transmission line will be able to bring an action against the party exercising eminent domain to recover the diminished value of the nearby property. This seems only fair and right. And third and finally, let me pose to you a hypothetical. The land subject to eminent domain is reliably appraised as being worth $100,000. But PSEG knows that if the landowner goes to court, the attorney's fees and expert witnesses that the landowner will incur will be at least $25,000. More if there are appeals. So PSEG will be able to offer the landowner an $80,000 settlement, knowing that the $80,000 amount would be more than the landowner would end up with after paying the attorney's fees and witness fees. So the land is worth $100,000, but the landowner either ends up with $80,000 or less if the landowner goes to court. That's just not right. Therefore, the third component of Senate Bill 955 provides that in the case of an eminent domain action due to the construction of an overhead transmission line, if the final ruling in a condemnation proceeding is that the fair value of the property is greater than the party bringing the eminent domain action had alleged it to be in the condemnation proceeding, the defendant will not only recover the fair market value of the property as determined by the court, but in addition will be awarded reasonable attorney's fees and reasonable expert witness fees. So in my hypothetical, in such a situation, the landowner would be awarded $125,000. The landowner would pay $25,000 to his attorneys and expert witnesses and would be left over with the $100,000 which the appraised value of the land came in at. So those are the three components of this bill. I appreciate the committee's consideration of the bill, and after Joanne Frederick speaks for 2 minutes, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we'll also take your virtual witness as well. How about that? Ms. Frederick, why don't you go next? You've got the 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Chair Feldman and members of the committee, again, for the record, my name is Joanne Frederick. I urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 955. To make way for this unnecessary project we call the MPRP, over 245 permanently protected conservation land would be condemned. An additional 1,800 acres of protected land lie within 500 feet of the right-of-way. Worse, the plan also calls for 303 access roads, destroying another 140 acres for heavy equipment and construction staging. This means loss of farmland, harm to ecosystems, and declining property values. Studies show property values drop by as much as 40% near high-voltage transmission lines. In Baltimore, Carroll, and Frederick County, 65 homes sit within 200 feet of the proposed MPRP corridor, and another 234 homes are within 500 feet. These families stand to lose significant financial security if this project moves forward. Maryland has worked for decades to preserve farms, forests, and rural communities. Senate Bill 955 ensures that landowners are protected from eminent domain abuse and that our conservation commitments are upheld. It provides for compensation for property owners whose land values decline due to forced transmission development. And we hope that it forces transmission developers to look for other solutions. Back to the previous legislation on GETS and our other alternatives, if we make new transmission difficult and expensive, maybe they'll finally be incentivized to implement the other solutions that we know exist and we know are better for Maryland. We cannot allow Maryland to become an energy wasteland to power Virginia data centers. Please stand with Maryland farmers, landowners, and communities by voting in favor of Senate Bill 955. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go get Harris Eisenstein into the queue. If you could. Okay, you've got up to 2 minutes, and you're part of Center West panel, and you're signed up straight favorable. Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Harris Eisenstein. I'm a Maryland attorney, and my practice focuses on eminent domain and related litigation. I strongly support Senate Bill 955. Over the past 15 years, I have represented Maryland citizens and businesses facing the harsh reality of the government taking their private property by eminent domain. This governmental power is rooted in the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, which reads in relevant part, "Nor shall private property be taken for public purpose without just compensation." While Maryland condemnors must pay just compensation, Maryland law does not allow condemnees to recover a truly just amount for the life-altering experience of losing their property rights. Senate Bill 955 is an important step in the right direction. Currently, a condemnee is entitled to recover the value of the land and improvements taken by eminent domain, plus any diminution in value to whatever property remains post-take. A condemnee cannot recover legal and expert fees incurred defending an eminent domain proceeding, except in rare circumstances. This is true even though a condemnor's initial offer often falls short of just compensation. These below-market offers force my clients to invest resources with me to develop, in collaboration with experts, the true value of the property taken. The result, while the condemnor may increase its just compensation package, the net received by my clients is reduced by whatever sums they must lay out for attorneys and experts. This is unjust. Senate Bill 955 addresses this inequity, particularly for those in Baltimore, Carroll, and Frederick counties at risk of losing property rights to the planned 70-mile power line known as the MPRP. If the sponsors of the MPRP secure the power of eminent domain, a question now before the Maryland Public Service Commission, they will forcibly install high-voltage above-ground power lines across Maryland. The state's energy supply is at an inflection point, and future utility projects like the MPRP are all but inevitable. Senate Bill 955 will protect citizens in the path of utility projects by allowing them to recover the market value of the land taken, plus their legal expert and related fees.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Senator West or the two witnesses? Senator Watson.
Thank you for this, Senator West, and I really appreciate it. When I've had to talk about different projects coming through my district, you know, my conversation was pay these folks double the market value. Based on the formula that you're using to look at the market value and then cover, you know, some other cost, and maybe Mr. Eisenstein could answer this question. Is that really enough for somebody to pick up, move all their belongings out, find another place to go? Maybe they have to, and what is the time frame by which they would have to vacate the premises if this happens?
Let's let Mr. Eisenstein answer that, because this is his area of expertise.
Okay, Mr. Eisenstein, did you get the question?
You're on mute.
You're on mute. You need to unmute.
You all can't hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go on.
I did hear the question, and unfortunately the answer is no. In the circumstance, for instance, where a farmer is totally displaced that has a 100-acre farm, it's very difficult to find a suitable replacement 100 acres in near proximity to where they presently farm. There are provisions under federal law applicable in the state of Maryland for relocation benefits, but in my humble opinion, they're not suitable. They're not nearly enough. Generally, what happens when someone is displaced is my effort is to maximize their return so that this difficult circumstances mitigated by a fair economic return, but particularly with farmland, it's near impossible for you to pick up and reestablish next to them.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add quickly, I forgot to mention, you'll have an amendment in your packet that I know I worked out with Mr. Eisenstein. The Legislative Service did the best they could to draft this bill, but some of the language was inexact. And so the amendment contains much better language, which would effectively implement the bill as I described it to you.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Senator Watson, you good? Or
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Eisenstein. Thank you for the bill. It's a start. I don't think it comes close to the true impact someone would have to see, especially if they've owned land for generations and have to give it up and find, either a new trade or what have you. I just don't know, but at least it's a start, and I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, Senator Hester.
Question for Mr. Eisenstein. I was just curious how Maryland's law compares to other states with respect to the private right of action. I mean, is it uncommon, actually? I mean, I was kind of surprised that people can't, aren't allowed to sue currently. So do other states do this differently?
Well, listen, if there, in the state of Maryland, if you want to file an inverse condemnation, in effect, your land's been taken, but the condemnor refuses to pay fair value for it, that's a process. I've been through that process. Ultimately, the better form for it is in federal court as compared to state court. I don't know the landscape with respect to how other states deal with neighboring properties. I know that Maryland, if it's not a direct take, the condemnor is not obligated to pay absent the bill that Senator West is putting forward. I do know with respect to legal fees and the recovery of legal fees, which I feel very strongly about, given that the condemnees are at such a disadvantage, right? They're up against big bad government, big bad PSEG, whoever it is, with endless resources and a team of lawyers that know, as Senator West highlighted earlier, they know that you're at a disadvantage and perhaps you don't want to hire a lawyer or what have you. There are many other states allow for the recovery of litigation expenses. Maryland does not, which is unfortunate, and which I hope this bill is one step in the right direction to accomplishing that very fair outcome.
Okay, any additional questions for Senator West? For the witnesses, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 955. Senator, which one's next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think next we should go to bill number 953.
Okay.
So here's where the slides are going to come in.
And we've got slides, and we've got your panelists are Frederick again and Ben Baker from the Public Service Commission. So, Ben, why don't you come up here, and you've got the slides up, and we're on Senate Bill 953.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 953 sets up a task force to meet intensively throughout the rest of this year and produce a report by the end of the year making recommendations that will ensure the reliability and adequacy of electricity available to Maryland ratepayers and businesses through 2040. That's a big assignment, but it's an essential one. I've spent a great deal of time over the course of last summer and fall working on this issue, so let me explain to you why I think Maryland is in a great deal of trouble right now and why such a task force is so paramount at this time. Maryland currently imports 40% of its electricity. Our state only generates 60% of the electricity it needs to provide power to its homes and businesses. This situation is on course to get far worse in the next decade. Maryland law already requires the phasing out of sales of new internal combustion engine motor vehicles by 2035 in just 10 years. But a June 4th, 2024 executive order by Governor Moore directs the State Department of Transportation to speed up the state's transition to electric vehicles. Of course, when most of the cars on our road are powered by electricity, Maryland's electricity usage will dramatically increase, and the state will necessarily have to import yet more electricity from other states. In the last session of the General Assembly, one of the governor's legislative initiatives was to give incentives to businesses to locate data centers in Maryland. As discussed earlier in connection with the other two bills, each data center uses massive amounts of electricity. So in this respect as well, Maryland is on course to consume massively increased amounts of electricity within the next decade. The Climate Solutions Now Act was passed in 2022. There was no discussion on the floor of the state Senate at that time that the bill was being debated about the effect of data centers on the state's electrical needs. Bills that mandate long-term critical policy changes in a world in which unexpected events occur with startling regularity can have unexpected consequences. Just as in 2019, no one anticipated the pandemic, in 2022, no one anticipated the phenomenal growth of data centers in this region. And Maryland is not the only state on track to greatly increase its use of electricity. Based on startling data just released 3 weeks ago by PJM, the entire PJM grid, which extends from Chicago to the Atlantic Ocean and from the New York border down to North Carolina, is experiencing a massive increase. Go back to the first slide. Massive increase in demand for electricity. The first slide that's on your screen right now was just released by PJM. I got it like 3 weeks ago. And you probably haven't seen this one before, and it illustrates this situation. In 2022, at the time Maryland debated the Climate Solutions Now Act, look at the line for 2022 in yellow down there. PJM was forecasting the peak summer demand for electricity system-wide would only increase marginally between 2022 and 2038 from about 150,000 megawatts per year to about 155 megawatts per year. Now look at the increase forecast the following year in 2023. That's the blue line. Look how much the line increases. Now look at the increase forecast released last year in 2024. Look at the massive increases in electricity. And now look at the just released 2025 forecast. These numbers are truly shocking. They reflect the construction of data centers system-wide. They reflect the statutory requirements in various states, including Maryland, to convert all the vehicles on our roads to electricity. What the slide does not reflect is the decision on the part of various states, most particularly including Maryland, to close down lots of existing facilities that generate electricity. But I have attached to my testimony a statement issued by PJM on January 30, 2025, just a month ago, that's shocking. Tucked away on page two of this statement is the following alarming pronouncement. Quote, a capacity shortage could affect the PJM system as early as the 2026-27 delivery year, which begins June 1, 2026, close quotes. Rephrased in plain English, PJM is predicting that as soon as June 1st, 2026, just 15 months from now, there could not be enough electricity in its system to satisfy the demands of consumers throughout the system. To put it bluntly, as soon as June 1st of next year, the PJM system could experience the same brownouts and blackouts that Texas experienced after its ice storm several years ago. This means that starting next June, at the time of peak demand, on the hottest days of the summer and the coldest days of the winter, parts of the PJM system will go dark. This means no air conditioning, no heat, no refrigerators, no computers, no hot water, no elevators in high-rise buildings, no lights in dark stairwells. In healthcare facilities without auxiliary power, elderly and sick people will die. Traffic lights will cease to operate. Accidents will multiply. Cars on the roads traveling that are electric vehicles, when they run out of juice, won't be able to repower themselves. BWI Airport, as we just saw earlier this week, without electricity, will have to shut down. Take what happened in Texas and replicate it in Maryland and other states in the PJM grid. And things will only get worse in the following years. Look at that slide once again. You will see that the 2025 forecast rises dramatically in each year after 2026. In 2026, the electricity demand is projected at about 155,000 megawatts. By 2028, just 2 years later, the demand is going to be up to 165,000 megawatts. In just 5 years, by 2030, it's up to 175,000 megawatts. So if PJM predicts that the grid is going to go dark on those peak demand days as early as next June, when the demand is only 155,000 megawatts, by 2030, we're going to go dark on lots of other non-peak days as well. And as if this information is not already grim enough, let's take another look at the supply side of the equation. Here's another slide from PJM. Now you can advance the slide to the next one, I think. Now one more up. There we go. That's the one I want. This one shows the existing capacity electric production in Maryland and DC. Actually, DC produces no electricity. So these stats only reflect Maryland's production capacity. Since 2018, Maryland has seen the retirement of 6,000 megawatts of its electrical generation resources. And the owner of both the Brandon Shores and the Wagner electrical generating plants has announced it plans to shut those plants down in the near future, thus depriving Maryland of additional 2,500 megawatts of generating capacity. According to this slide, Maryland is currently capable of producing a total of 11,161 megawatts of electricity. Of this amount, natural gas, coal, and oil collectively account for 8,587 megawatts, or 77% of Maryland's electrical production capacity. But the Climate Solutions Now Act, coupled with Governor Moore's June 4, 2024 executive order, require the closure of all of Maryland's fossil fuel electrical generating facilities by 2035, in just 10 years. So unless something happens to change our course, that means that by 2035, Maryland will only be capable of producing 2,574 megawatts. So instead of importing 40% of our electricity as we do today, by 2035, we will only be producing 15% of our electricity that we need, and we'll be importing fully 85% of our electricity. Now, one might argue that Maryland can deal with this situation by just continuing to ramp up its importation of electricity from other states. But there are three very serious problems with this approach. First, and most importantly, as illustrated by the previous slide, as early as next June, PJM anticipates that there could be a capacity shortage across the entire grid. In such a situation, importing electricity from other states on the grid will not be possible during periods of heavy demand for electricity, as there will not be any surplus electricity to import. Second, bringing in ever-increasing electricity from beyond our borders will necessitate the construction of more electrical transmission lines. The anguish caused by the new transmission line currently being proposed by PSEG will just be the tip of the iceberg. PJM's mandate is to make sure that no users in its region go dark, so it will need to contract for the construction of as many additional transmission lines as are necessary to deliver all the additional electricity to Maryland that the state needs. And third, and perhaps most significantly, Maryland's increasing reliance on other states to supply us with electricity will come at a significant cost to Maryland ratepayers. This is due to the capacity market run by PJM. Each PJM market that provides electricity to consumers, including utilities such as BG&E, which serves central Maryland, must contractually arrange to acquire enough power from suppliers to meet demand, not only for today and tomorrow, but for the future. Members secure these resources for the future through the PJM capacity market, which through periodic auctions of electricity, pair utilities needing power with suppliers capable of providing the power needed to meet predicted energy demand for 3 years into the future. The capacity market auctions conducted by PJM are governed by the laws of supply and demand. While the General Assembly can pass and repeal all of the laws it wants, it cannot repeal the law of supply and demand. When demand rapidly increases, as at present, and supply is constrained, as at present, the price of capacity market electricity skyrockets. Now we can go to the next slide, or maybe the one after this. Go to the one after this. That's it. The most recent capacity auction occurred last July. Given the high anticipated demand and limited anticipated supplies of power, it was not surprising that the price paid by BG&E for its capacity power in last July's auction shot up to $466 per megawatt day, a 600% increase. BG&E's price will be the highest price paid by any utility in the entire PJM system. And this slide illustrates this fact. These higher costs will be passed through to BG&E's customers starting this coming June 1st. And the current expectations are that an average BG&E customer will experience a $300 to $432 annual increase in that customer's electrical bills during the 12 months starting on June 1st of this year. PJM anticipates that in its next auction, the cost of capacity electricity will rise even higher, perhaps much higher. In other words, Maryland's failure to satisfy its electrical needs through local generation of electricity and its reliance on the capacity market will hit every single Maryland family and every single Maryland business in their pocketbooks each time they receive their monthly electrical bills. Many Maryland consumers are going to be very upset when they start to receive these markedly higher monthly bills. It's not an exaggeration to conclude that Maryland's energy situation is dire today and threatens to become catastrophic within a very short period of time. Because new generating facilities take a long time to plan, get permitted, finance, construct, and put into operation, continuing to drag our feet about what to do is just not an option. I will say off script here, I had a meeting 3 weeks ago with a very, very prominent person who knows Maryland's situation inside and out. He didn't want his name to be used. He couldn't come and testify. I said, are we too late? Is it possible to do anything to stop the fate that seems to be about to hit us? And he said, off the record, I can't say this on the record, yes, it's too late. That was coming from a genuine expert in this area who knows what he's talking about. So Senate Bill 953, sorry it took so long to get mention 953, but here we are, creates a task force to meet intensively throughout the rest of this year and to produce a report by the end of the year making recommendations that will ensure the reliability and adequacy of the electricity available to Maryland ratepayers and businesses through 2040. The mission of the task force will be to assess where we will be in 5 years, in 10 years, and in 15 years if we continue along the same course we're on today, and to consider how things would be different in those years if we set a goal for ourselves of importing no more than 25% of our electricity in future years. I tried to be realistic about this. Getting down to zero, I think, is probably unrealistic. But getting down to 25%, since we're at 40% now, seems to me a realistic target that we should aspire to. So, Senate Bill 953 explicitly requires the task force to include the consideration of the expansion of nuclear generation in the state, the expansion of renewable energy resources in the state, the prioritization of energy storage facilities in the state, and the upgrades and enhancements of transmission systems in the state. It doesn't slight the use of natural gas. That's certainly included, but all these other elements are specifically mentioned. The membership of the task force is intentionally broad and diverse. I will rely on this committee to alter the membership of the task force to fill in gaps. But my intention was to get the smartest people in the state into a room and get them to grapple with these issues in a very serious way. And for these reasons, the task force is not stacked one way or the other. Finally, I've provided the members of the committee with 2 proposed amendments to this bill. First, as originally drafted, the bill requires the Public Service Commission to defer any decision on the pending application of PSEG for a certificate of convenience and necessity as to the existing proposed 70-mile transmission line until next May 1st, 2026. The PSC has objected to this infringement on their prerogatives. I am satisfied the PSC is going to perform all of its customary due diligence with respect to the current application and will not approve the application if the General Assembly in the 2026 session is considering significant changes to Maryland's energy policies that would obviate the need for the new proposed transmission line. And so the first of my amendments proposes deleting lines 4 through 7 on page 4 of the bill. The second amendment is as follows. DLS drafted this bill to assign a July 4th start date for the task force. I don't think we should wait until July 4th to get started on this. And for that reason, I've had an amendment prepared to make this bill an emergency bill so the task force can start to meet as soon as the governor signs the bill. And we'll have the most time possible before it has to render its report at the end of the year. So I appreciate the committee's consideration of this bill. I'll be happy to answer any questions the committee might have as long as my voice holds out. In the meantime, Joanne Frederick and Ben Baker are going to give me a chance to rest my voice as they deliver their testimony.
Okay, Ms. Frederick, and then we'll take Mr. Baker, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Chair Feldman. For the record, my name is Joanne Frederick, and I am here to strongly urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 953. We are caught in the unfortunate position of being between power-rich Pennsylvania and power-hungry Virginia. PJM interconnection and utility companies are pushing unnecessary profit-driven transmission projects that would cut across our communities and farmland, not to serve Marylanders, but to funnel electricity to Virginia's data centers. There are an additional 117 new data centers being considered in Loudoun County, Virginia right now. PJM's latest awarded project actually connects the John Amos coal plant in West Virginia to the Daub substation in Frederick County to then continue on to Virginia. So even if the power for Virginia would come from West Virginia, we're still getting stuck with power lines for it. Instead of prioritizing local generation, grid modernization, and ratepayer affordability, we are being forced into a cycle to fight new transmission projects year after year. And while our governor has questions about the PJM process, we need facts and data. And unless and until we have the data that demonstrates how Maryland can and should meet our energy needs, we will continue to be targeted until we are nothing more than an energy wasteland crisscrossed by high voltage lines serving others. Senate Bill 953 creates a task force to put Maryland back in control of our future, develop a Maryland-centric, data-driven empirical plan that optimizes our existing transmission and distribution system, increases in-state generation to lower costs and improve reliability, and protects our agricultural land and communities from the destruction of unnecessary transmission. We must stop being collateral damage and profit-driven plans that benefit others. Senate Bill 953 ensures that Maryland's energy policy is based in our needs, not dictated by out-of-state entities or utilities. I urge this committee to issue a favorable report.
Okay, Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Ben Baker on behalf of the Maryland Public Service Commission. We are supportive of this legislation with amendments. Our primary one is the one that the Senator has agreed to make at this time regarding the removal of the prohibit of our ability to approve new CPCNs for transmission until next year. The other is more of a suggestion to consider if there's clarity around any scenarios that you want us to be focusing on if you do choose to go forward with this study and task force. But other than that, anything that helps us better understand our energy future and needs, we've been primarily supportive of and trying to make sure that we can deliver that as we continue to work together on the policies to serve the energy in the state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baker. Questions for Senator West or the two panelists? Okay, seeing then, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 953. Senator West, we've just said we have 950 and 951 left.
Let's go with 951.
Okay.
As promised at the beginning, and also because my voice is getting thin, the next two sets of testimony are going to be very brief. I'm not going to read, I'm just going to riff. So once I was developed all this research and information, I sat down and thought, what should we do? How can we solve our problem? What's the best approach? And so these last two bills reflect the approaches I thought we should take. To begin with, I said, do we have any low-hanging fruit here? And the quick answer is yes. So I'm look at the slide on the screen right now. It shows what projects are in line to clear the PJM interconnection process of queuing up. And you'll see, even though there are 488 projects system-wide, Maryland only has 6 projects, only 6. And if they all were to be built, and by the way, only 10 to 15% of the projects that clear the queue end up being built, if they were all being built, it would create a grand total of 1,245 megawatts. Insignificant in terms of our needs. So here I'm thinking, what can we do? Is there a low-hanging fruit? And here's the low-hanging fruit. 25 years ago, we said, let's stop utilities from generating electricity. and they've all been out of the market. The theory was that companies from out of state would come into Maryland with a lot of money and they would invest in utilities. That hasn't happened. It happened for a while, but the ones that came have left. There's one left. It's Talon. And Talon is currently operating 2 generating facilities called Brandon Shores and Wagner, which are located on the Patapsco River just outside what used to be the Key Bridge. Talon wants to close, in Senator Simon Ayer's district, Talon wants to close those facilities down and shut them down. And I thought, this makes no sense at all. They are collectively generating about 2,500 megawatts of power per year, and yet Talon is going to shut them down. That makes no sense. BG&E, which is nearby, has a natural gas line within a mile of those facilities. By the way, Brandon Shores is a coal facility. Wagner is an oil-powered facility. Natural gas is much better. It's cleaner, it's cheaper, it's plentiful, and BG&E has a line a mile away. So I met with BG&E last summer, and I said, why don't you all acquire the Talon plant and take it over and generate electricity in that facility? They said, we would love to, but we can't. I said, why can't you? And they talked about the law which prevents utilities in Maryland from generating power. So my thought was, my goodness, we can change such a law, and we should. So as originally drafted, this bill would let any utility in the state generate power anywhere in the state. I got some pushback. So you will find that I think maybe we should consider that, but it's a separate bill for a separate conversation at a separate time. So I amended this bill, and as amended, this bill merely permits the Public Service Commission to require or allow a utility to acquire, lease, and operate generating facilities, and they're defined in such a way as to create a red-headed Eskimo. They couldn't say Brandon Shores and Wagner, but they're defined in such a way as to isolate Brandon Shores and Wagner as the only 2 facilities I'm talking about here. So it could be BG&E, it could be another utility, but if this bill is passed, it would mean a state utility could be required by the Public Service Commission to acquire Brandon Shores and Wagner from Talon and continue to operate them so they're continued to be used to generate electricity here in Maryland. That's the first bill. And with that, I turn the proceedings over to, again, once again, to Joanne Frederick.
Okay, Ms. Frederick.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Chair Feldman. Again, for the record, Joanne Frederick, Stop MPRP, Inc., here to support Senate Bill 951. The nice thing about the 2 power plants is the distribution and transmission lines are in place. So we don't have to battle through the rebuilding of the infrastructure that would be required for the new generation happening there. And as we've been talking about, all day and actually all session, we have some energy challenges here in Maryland, and this bill is an easy way for us to leverage our existing infrastructure, get it online in a cleaner fashion faster, and hopefully improve Maryland's energy ecosystem in a very quick manner. So with that, I support Senate Bill 951. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Senator West or the panel? Senator Gallion.
Mr. Chair, thank you for this bill, Senator. So right now with those plants remaining open there under the RMR,
yes.
How would that work in this legislation, as you mentioned it, as amended? How would that work? That would remove that, and it would just become like a regular generation without that, which would save ratepayers money?
They're being paid by PJM, and then in turn we are paying PJM for the cost of keeping them open because Talon wants to close them. And they're being paid a massive amount of money to keep them open. If the Public Service Commission were to require, say, BG&E to extend its natural gas line and keep them open and convert them to natural gas, then BG&E would not get paid a huge amount of money from PJM to keep them open. BG&E would be operating them under its own steam. So it would save our ratepayers a lot of money.
Right, so more or less like if it was BG&E had their, or I know they can't right now, but if a power company had opened a new place, it would kind of be the same.
Exactly.
Thing. So okay,
yeah, Talon wants to close them. They wanted to close them as of the end of last year. And the only reason they're open now is because they're being paid this massive amount of money to keep them going, which we in turn are paying for.
Thank you. By the way, do you remember back in the Finance Committee you had the bill to phase out the coal-fired power plant.
I
Do you
did
remember that? I didn't mean to bring it up, but since, you know, you kind of walked into it
I
a
did
little bit,
indeed, but as long as you brought that up.
Senator Augustine's not here, but we definitely remember that bill.
I still believe we should not be using coal.
Okay.
But I did that bill advisedly, knowing that BG&E had a natural gas line a mile away, and that easily could be converted to natural gas, and then could continue to operate burning natural gas instead of coal.
Okay, I just wanted to bring it up.
No, you've got a very good memory.
Okay, questions for Senator West? Okay, Senator Brooks.
Yes, Senator? Yeah. BGE, it is a regulated utility company, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and if they were to get back into production, then we would be re-regulating them.
Yes, we would.
Yeah.
As a producer of electricity.
As a producer, yeah.
As well as a distributor of electricity.
Yeah, so the cost, so any cost that would be incurred for upgrading, would that be at the ratepayer's expense?
Yes. If they converted coal to natural gas, the ratepayers would ultimately pay for the conversion.
Okay.
I think, frankly, it's in our interest to get rid of our coal plants and convert them to natural gas.
Yeah. Okay.
I have, as Senator Feldman pointed out, I felt that way for years.
Yeah.
Stop burning coal, burn natural gas instead.
Yes. Some folks feel as though if you got with a company doing generating and distributing, you know, then they've got just about all of the eggs in a basket, and they can sort of really. Oh, sure, go right ahead. Yeah.
Senator Brooks, I think the other thing, there are two ways to look at that, right? There are two sides to that coin. One is they get to build it and they get to distribute it, and they're making money on both sides. The other way to look at that is they can consider the investment on either side of that equation and consider what would be the best for, they're a Maryland utility. They don't want to make Marylanders any more angry than we are currently. So would they, for the sake of distribution, charge less money for the conversion of a plant to natural gas because they can make money over a longer period of time? Part of the challenge is the payback on the investment. And that's why natural gas plants aren't being opened here, because there's no assuredness that they will be able to run as long as is needed is to pay back that investment. So I hear you, but I think there are two ways to look at that.
Yeah, I think probably, I don't know, maybe whether or not we'd be giving too much control to them. But at the same time, there are some emerging technologies that are coming, in the not too distant future. So maybe perhaps we should really, and I understand the dire about what you projected, but we know when we look at the emerging technologies, especially the new nuclear, which is not that far away. Hopefully that can save us.
Exactly. I'll talk about that in a little bit when I get the last bill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Why don't we get to this last West bill? We're on, so that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 951, which brings us to the final West bill, Senate Bill 950. Ms. Frederick, you can stay up there, and then Mr. Pavlak's still here. Is Alex? Okay, why don't you you're FWA. These are the only witnesses on the bill, so let's just do this. And Senator West on Senate Bill 950.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's been a pleasure to be here this afternoon. At the risk of losing my voice altogether, let me just again riff on what I thought once I finally finished my research and tried to figure what this all meant. It was clear to me that Maryland is going to have a serious problem shortly in terms of a lack of electrical generating capacity. And let me put my cards on the table. Long term, my view is nuclear is definitely the way to go. Nuclear, Calvert Cliffs has been terrific. It hasn't caused us any problems. It generates cheap electricity. We ought to head in that direction long term. And again, long term. And I will say, David Smith, who now runs the Baltimore Sun and is the president of Sinclair Broadcasting, seems to be my most faithful correspondent. He favors me every single day, with articles from exotic publications on nuclear developments. It is incredible how much is going on in this country in the area of nuclear. Nuclear is definitely going to be there, and I frankly think Maryland should not be the caboose at the end of the nuclear train. I don't think we should be the engine either and be the guinea pig. I would prefer to regard us as the coal car, right behind the engine, near the front of the train, and not at the back of the train. That's the long-term future, but that's long-term. What are we going to do in the meantime? Renewables, after all the years of renewables, currently renewables provide about 4% of the electricity we use. 4%. Any hope that the renewables are going to come to our rescue in the next year, 5 years, 10 years is unrealistic, is a fantasy. What else could come to our rescue? There are people who suggested batteries, storage batteries. I don't think investing in tens of billions of dollars of storage batteries is going to solve our problem. So what are we going to do for the next 10 years? How are we going to get by? And the simple answer is we have to rely on natural gas. I know there are people on this committee, and there's certainly the environmental committee, community hates natural gas, but it's there, it's available, it's cheap, and why in the world we look the other way astounds me. So what this bill simply says is until such time as nuclear plus renewables equal 50% of the electricity Maryland needs. Until that time comes, natural gas is permitted in Maryland. In that way, it overrides the Climate Solutions Now Act until we reach the 50% mark. Once we reach 50%, then our authorities at the state level are charged with gradually reducing the amount of natural gas, even as we continue to increase the amount of nuclear and renewables, until ultimately we're at 100% nuclear renewables and 0% natural gas. But in the meantime, it just makes every bit of sense to me. I'm thinking in a common sense way, not a sophisticated way, a common sense way, that we need to rely on natural gas, and we need to somehow get away from the strict requirements of the governor's executive order last June and the Climate Solutions Now Act that we have to stop all use of natural gas within 10 years, because that discourages anyone from investing any money in Maryland in natural gas because they know they'll never get their money out. Thank you.
Okay, let's next go to Ms. Frederick. Why don't you go next?
Thank you, Chair Feldman. Again, for the record, Joanne Frederick here to support Senate Bill 950 because it ensures Maryland controls its own energy future, adds well-paying jobs, and protects ratepayers from rising electricity costs. The bill would bring thousands of high-paying jobs to Maryland, union construction jobs, plant operations, and engineering positions, supporting local economies, skilled trade, and energy workers across the state. The economic impact of power generation is substantial, from direct deployment to the businesses that support these facilities. At the same time, Maryland families and businesses are feeling the strain of rising electricity bills. By increasing in-state generation, we reduce reliance on costly imports and stabilize our energy prices. More supply means lower costs for consumers, protecting our communities from unpredictable rate hikes. Senate Bill 950 is a practical, balanced approach. It puts Maryland in control of energy, creates economic opportunities, and delivers immediate relief from rising energy costs. For these reasons, I urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 950. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Pavlik.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to comment on Senate Bill 950. My name is Dr. Alex Pavlik, a PhD engineer from Smyrna Park and the chairman of the Future of Energy Initiative. I think I can offer a little insight into root causes of what is some of the dynamics of what we're seeing here. And what I see is one of the root causes of many of Maryland's problems is the RGGI program, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. RGGI is a carbon tax. It has been increasing gradually over 2 decades. It's gotten to be very big. Last year, RGGI delivered $220 million to the CEF. The fossil fuel industry in Maryland is not that big. Gross revenues are roughly $600 million, and we're taking $200 million out of it to fund Maryland's climate programs through the CEF. They can't stay in business that way. They dial back on their investments. The capital equipment base of the fossil fuel industry turns into a pile of junk, and they go out of business. In fact, it's Maryland climate policies that are driving them out of state. They cannot compete with cheap imported electricity. The one area where I do disagree with Senator West on this bill is, I think, simply authorizing the construction of natural gas will not accomplish anything. Wall Street is not investing in Maryland fossil fuel not because of Maryland regulatory policy, but because they cannot make a profit. They need an incentive. And my proposed amendment is to exempt 2 gigawatts of new natural gas from the requirement to purchase RGGI carbon allowances for 2 years. That should stimulate your new natural gas construction. Without that, I don't think you'll see it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pavlik. We're going to go to Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator West, I first want to thank you. We spoke over the interim, and you were spending a tremendous amount of time, not only, first of all, researching the problem, but really coming up with solutions, both more immediate and more for the future. And this one, to me, natural gas, especially in my district, it's been a lifeline. You know, Somerset County was like the last county in the whole state of Maryland to come on board, and it's just been, you know, a lifeline there. My question is, I was looking at some of the opposition testimony, which kind of surprised me. If you know, a lot of us who are supporting all of the above approach didn't quite understand, you know, maybe the opposition from nuclear on this. But in your view, what is the most cost-effective way to move forward with natural gas expansion?
Well, let me start by agreeing with Mr. Pavlik, actually. 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting in my office with the chair of the board of one of the 5 largest energy companies in the country. We closed the door and we had an extremely interactive conversation for the better part of an hour. And he has his company has facilities in most of the states, not in Maryland. And he said, we have tens of billions of dollars to invest in new facilities. I said, why don't you come to Maryland? And he said, I can't come to Maryland. He's raised it with the management of the company, and they've presented chapter and verse as to why it makes no sense financially for anyone to invest in Maryland because of RGGI. He went through the numbers, and he actually showed me some slides. He authorized me to use the slides, but I thought it'd be too complicated to bring RGGI slides to these hearings. He showed me slides. He wouldn't allow me, he wouldn't come testify himself, it wouldn't allow his name to be used. But he said Maryland is just out of the market because of RGGI. So I agree with Mr. Pavlik in that respect. I'm not sure Senate Bill 950 as written is the answer. In its entirety, it may be part of the answer. There needs to be more to it. It needs to be frankly, it needs to be workshopped. And the best place to workshop it would be in that task force that you weren't here, but I proposed in an earlier bill. So that they could come at the end of the year and propose doing something along these lines, but to do it in a much more complete and successful way than is encapsulated in 1.5 pages in this bill. And I frankly think that's the best way to proceed. We should form the task force, let them do their thing, come back with recommendations to us. I'm sure some of those recommendations will involve natural gas, and then we should adopt their recommendations and next year pass legislation to implement their recommendations to get us an interim fuel source to bridge the gap between today and the time when nuclear gets up to full speed in Maryland and we're able to satisfy our energy needs through the use of nuclear.
I understand that response, but there also, as you presented the bill, there was a sense of urgency on finding these more immediate sources now.
Yeah,
and that's why I was trying to look from the standpoint of since some of the issues that were raised were the cost issues, just trying to figure out was there a most cost-effective way to fast track?
Yeah, Senator, for all the research I've done, I started basically from scratch. When I started working on this a year ago, I had nothing more than my high school general science course to draw on. I've learned enough to know that I know a lot, but I don't have all the answers. And I probably don't even have the right answers in some cases, but I'm confident that the people we get on this task force will have the right answers. If I'm appointed to sit on it as a senator, I expect to learn a lot and contribute something. And at the end, as much as I would love to proceed forward, hell-bent for election right now, I don't think I'm in a position to confidently recommend to this committee exactly what we should do today with respect to what the task force might be coming up with at the end of the year.
No, I understand that, and I wasn't asking that. It was more in line to this specific bill tied to natural gas, but we will follow up. Thank you, sir.
And we'll talk in the interim, I'm sure.
Okay, any additional questions? Wait, did I get, Mr. Pavlik, I apologize. Did I catch you? Yeah, we're good. Any additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate
And
Bill 950.
thank you, Mr. Chair, and the members of
Sure.
the committee for bearing patiently with me for this past hour.
And I always tell you, I do get your email blasts on this subject, so I actually read where you're coming from. So, okay, but thank you. That concludes the West foursome of bills, and we're going to next go to Senator Gallion, who's going to play cleanup here. We've got 4 quick Gallion bills with very limited witnesses, but they are the final 4 bills, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do some voting. Just remember that, folks. So, Senator Gallion, you've got 4 bills. Do you want any particular order?
Let's just go in numerical. It'll be easy.
Okay, we're going to start with Senate Bill 478, and the only witness is Dom Butchko from MACO. Why don't you come up, Dom? And you're signed up favorable. Again, Senate Bill 478.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, committee members. For the record, Senator Jason Gallion here introduced Senate Bill 878, Public Utilities, Solar Energy Generation Stations, local approval.
Okay, no, we know. It's good. 478.
I'm sorry, 478, 478. There's a lot of overlap. We've heard a lot of different energy bills today. There's going to be a lot of overlap with this and also with some of the hearings we had Friday. I'll try to be half as eloquent as Senator West. It'll be tough, but we'll try. We'll give it the college try here. So, all right. This is, as I mentioned, another bill that ties in with the hearings we had last Friday. Senate Bill 478 specifies that the PSC may not approve a certificate of public convenience and necessity for a solar energy generating station unless each county or municipality where any portion of the generating station is proposed to be located has provided the PSC with written approval for the construction of the generating station. It is my belief that our counties need to have greater say in the implementation of these large solar projects as the counties are closer to the people and understand their communities the best. And that's where, in my opinion, the role of zoning and permitting belongs. We've had this issue right in my home county, in my district, Harford County. Property owner wanted to install a large solar farm. The former county administration weighed in at the PSC and through the different hearing processes ended up ruling against the county there. I know this is part of a broader conversation as we evaluate how we produce energy in the state, but I think it's imperative that we find a way to include our counties so that we're all rowing in the same direction, because ultimately the county level is where the rubber meets the road, and when there's a complaint, that's who our constituents are going to first. I respectfully ask a favorable vote on this legislation, and I'd like to turn it over to Dom Butchko with MACO to discuss further the importance of local control regarding these matters.
Okay, Dom, you're up.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dom with MACO, here in support of Senate Bill 478. Counties, we are the level of government closest to the people. We are in the communities that we all call home, and it's very important that we make sure that as we're shaping the look, smell, and feel of those communities, we have all the tools we need in order to do that and answer to our mutual constituents. I'm going to refer you to our written testimony. MACO clearly thinks this is probably one of the best energy bills you guys will hear this year, and we strongly urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Senator Gallion or Dom? Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 478. Let's next go to Senate Bill 483. And I've got Mark Kuka, Joanne Frederick, and Patricia Von Paris is here, FWA. I don't know if she's here. Is Patricia here? Okay, there you are. Not sure if Patricia's here, but are you Mark? That's you? Okay. So you're signed up part of the panel, and you're both favorable? Yeah. Is she? Who's behind you? I'm a little unclear.
Oh, no, not.
Are you Patricia or?
That's my family.
Oh, okay. Okay, fair enough. Well, Senator Gallion, Senate Bill 483.
Good afternoon once again, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, my esteemed fellow committee members. For the record, once again, Senator Jason Gallion, this time introducing Senate Bill 483, Public Utilities, Alternatives to Construction of New Transmission Lines. This bill modifies and expands the circumstances under which the PSC must examine alternatives to the construction of a new transmission line in a service area as part of the CPCN process. PSC must examine these alternatives if the use of an alternative is convenient to the service area, will best promote economic and efficient service to the public, will best maintain historical, environmental, or agricultural preservation areas, or will avoid any overlap with a lot, parcel, or tract of land that is located within a planned growth area identified in a local jurisdiction's comprehensive plan or zone for residential use. These alternatives would include, number one, the use of an existing transmission lines from another company. Number two, the use of an existing right-of-way. 3, reconductoring an existing transmission line. And 4, undergrounding a transmission line. This legislation intends to find a balance between safeguarding our rural landscapes while supporting responsible infrastructure development. I would like to thank the co-sponsors on this bipartisan bill, Senators Brooks, Carrozza, and Watson, for their support. And at this time, I'd like to pass it over to my panelists who have firsthand experience dealing with this process, and I'd like to ask the committee for a favorable report on this legislation. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Mark, why don't you go? You want to go next?
I have an amendment, so I'm wondering if I should defer.
Okay, let's go to Ms. Frederick then first, and then we'll go to you.
Thank you, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan. Again, Joanne Frederick, STOP NPRP, here to urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 483. Utilities and transmission developers, as we've discussed, have significant financial incentives to build new transmission rather than upgrade existing infrastructure. Federal regulations allow utilities to earn a guaranteed rate of return on investment for new transmission projects, often at higher rates than maintaining existing lines. This creates a perverse financial incentive. We pay those bills. And prioritizes costly new projects over more efficient solutions like reconductoring, demand response, and flexible load management. Peak times are typically only 2 to 3 hours on the coldest of winter mornings. A February 2025 report from Duke University's Nicholas Institute found that up to 126 gigawatts of new load can be integrated into the existing grid using curtailment strategies, reducing the need for new transmission expansion. These strategies, such as demand response, flexible load management, and temporary curtailment of large energy users during peak hours, allow the grid to handle increased electricity without overbuilding costly, unnecessary infrastructure. And the bottom line is we don't look at those today. Senate Bill 483 ensures that before approving new transmission line, the PSC considers all of these cost-effective and proven alternatives. This bill will protect Maryland's ratepayers from unnecessary costs, ensure better use of existing infrastructure, and prevent utilities from prioritizing profits over smart energy planning. I urge the committee to issue a favorable report on Senate Bill 483. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sir?
Good afternoon, Chairman Feldman, members of the committee. My name is Dr. Mark Kuka. I'm here to testify in favor of Senate Bill 483 with one amendment regarding use of the existing right-of-way. I'm particularly concerned with the Brandon Shores Retirement Mitigation Project and closure of that plant. I'm a lifelong Kingsville resident. I live within 400 feet of an existing BGE electrical transmission line that has been upgraded twice in the past 8 years. Today, we have 1,200% more electricity flowing through our neighborhood than we did back in 2016. I'm here to oppose the construction of yet another set of 12 230 kV lines, which effectively double the electricity flowing through our neighborhood. Why would we run another set of extension cords from Pennsylvania to power our state? Maryland needs to be generating electrical power here where we control the price. Importing power from elsewhere brings up the law of supply and demand. Pennsylvania doesn't want these proposed set of power lines either. The Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission recently appealed to the Third Circuit. Transforce versus DeFrank, opposing construction of yet another set of power lines and poles through Pennsylvania into Maryland. Maryland should be on a path of more power generation. Here are some things we could be doing. keep Brandon Shores and the Wagner power plants open, convert them to run on cleaner natural gas. There's already an existing natural gas pipeline about a mile away. Issue the permits to bring natural gas to both of these existing power plants. BGE needs to implement grid-enhancing technologies. They are a collection of hardware and software tools that help utilities manage electricity flow. Consider the placement of small modular reactors at both Brandon Shores and Calvert Cliffs. Dominion Energy and Amazon are doing this right now in Virginia. And lastly, consider the building of a third nuclear reactor at Calvert Cliffs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Senator Gallion or the two witnesses on his panel? Okay, seeing none. Is Patricia Von Paris here? Don't believe so. Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 483. Senator Gallion, we're going to go next to Senate Bill 640. And Don Butchko, you're the panelist. And Senator Gallion, Senate Bill 640.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, fellow committee members. For the record, Senator Jason Gallion introduced SB 640, Public Utilities Solar Energy Generating Stations, Eminent Domain. This legislation would prohibit the use of eminent domain in connection with the construction of a solar energy generating station. We all heard a lot of testimony regarding this specific issue this past Friday, so I'll keep this brief. As we know, there are ongoing conversations about amendments being worked through to the chairman's bill from Friday. This language will certainly ease the mind of a lot of folks concerned that the expansion of solar will lead to land being seized through the use of eminent domain rather than it being their own choice. It is my understanding that this legislation may be included in proposed amendments. I would encourage my colleagues to support any amendments containing the prohibition of eminent domain related to the construction of solar energy generating stations, or if you want to make it simpler, you could just pass this bill. We'll see, your choice. Anyhow, ask for favorable of either that sort of amendment or this legislation, and turn it over to Don.
Okay, Don.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dom with MACO. We are hearing a considerable amount of chatter from our members that there is a fear from landowners, specifically in rural jurisdictions, but also in other areas, that the push for renewable energy will ultimately turn to the state or the Public Service Commission using eminent domain in order to get land for solar. This is something that has been coming up in our legislative committee in one-on-ones when we go out and visit each individual jurisdiction, and it's just become a very salient talking point. Speaking with members of the administration, that does not appear to be their plan whatsoever, realistically. That being said, this is an issue that is resonating from our mutual constituents, and MACO urges a favorable report on Senate Bill 640.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Gallion and Dom, thank you for the explanations, which seem to make a lot of sense. And eminent domain is a pretty extreme action in terms of quick take and all that. So this makes some sense. Tell me, though, why just solar, and whether you gave any thought to any other types of power, of energy that we might be looking at any level.
I think probably was just restricted to solar at this time just because of the amount of land and acreage it takes. And we had a bill hearing earlier that talked about some power line issues, I guess, with that too. So I mean, I guess we could look at other things too. But solar was kind of the focus of this one.
So yeah, so I will say MACO supports the bill. We weren't involved in the drafting. Sure. What I can tell you though is about the conversations that we're having. What we're hearing from our members is because solar is different than any other generating system because of just the land mass it takes. It's different from a nuclear plant, which can fit in a nice even space. Because it is so broad and so big, there is a fear that in order to meet the targets, whether those fears are realistic or not, there is a fear that you would need so much land that you would have to resort to eminent domain. That is a talking point that is very much alive, especially on the Eastern Shore, but also in Frederick County, for example.
I'm going to suggest, Dom, and then I'll wrap, Mr. Chair, that rooftops and parking lot decks and all that aren't so intrusive and so sprawling that they should be included in this. So we can talk offline if you like, but
Yeah, can I
think
comment
it's
on that
awfully
really
broad.
quick?
Please, it's okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the intent is more for agricultural land, not for rooftops, not for any of that. I think everybody would want to encourage that. At least from what I'm hearing from my members, our conversations, there is a fear that ag land in particular will be targeted and will be eminent domain will be used against.
The intention was what would be almost rise to the level of like a power generation station, and like rooftop doesn't fall, you know, if you have it at your just individual residence. So.
Gallion, yeah. So I'm not an attorney, and so our counsel can guide us on this, but it seems to be in the public utilities article and not in agriculture or something. So maybe there's a possibility that should be somewhere else, or maybe there's just a conversation about some modification or whatever as the committee considers this. But I get the concept. I'm not sure I get the reality as drafted. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Additional questions on this piece of legislation? Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 610, which brings us to our final bill for the today. I'm sorry, 640. Final bill for today, Senate Bill 643. Senator Gallion, and we've got Alex Pavlock behind you. Come on up. You're signed up favorable with amendments. Senator Gallion, final bill.
Sure. Good afternoon. Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, fellow committee members. For the record, Senator Jason Gallion introducing Senate Bill 643, Public Utilities, Energy Generation, and Transmission. Colleagues, we are all very well aware of the increased utility bills our constituents are dealing with and our reliance on importing 40% of our energy from out of state. If we are forced to continue this reliance on importing more and more electricity, we'll continue to deal with disruptive and, in some cases, intrusive overhead transmission lines. We've heard a lot about that already today. Maryland needs baseload natural gas generation projects to connect to the grid at a rapid pace to help stabilize pricing, avoid service interruptions, and avoid blackouts. This legislation will, with amendments, will provide a clear path for private investor-owned electric companies to construct, acquire, or lease and operate its own energy generating facilities in the state. Many would agree that as a result of state and federal energy policies that have primarily focused on wind, solar, and battery storage, with wind and solar being intermittent resources, and also some excessive regulations cause 24/7 baseload plants to retire early without viable replacements. In 2020, Talon Energy announced its plans to retire Brandon Shores by 25, and in October 23, Talon notified PJM that Wagner would also be retired by 2025. In response, PJM requested to run the coal plants on reliability must run, or RMR, contracts until there is sufficient infrastructure to retire the two plants without risking reliability. Senate Bill 643 focuses on today's energy crisis by allowing electricity suppliers to enter the energy generation space. To point out a few benefits of this, electric utilities are already highly regulated by the PSC. They are currently invested in Maryland, which is beneficial to Marylanders because they are familiar with the industry and they can acquire the capital to invest. Both investor-owned electric companies and electricity suppliers entities are subject to obtaining CPCN, or Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, and commission approval for the construction of the generating system. We all know that our state needs to secure our own supply of electricity and to decrease our dependency on other states. PJM and the North American Electric Reliability Corporation have been warning about the risks to our bulk power system due to early closures of a 24/7 baseload generation. This bill also includes support for the development of additional nuclear energy in the state, plus it encourages PJM to provide expedited interconnection process for new thermal generation resources in the state. I believe Maryland needs to generate its own electricity with resources like natural gas plants, small modular reactors, and support nuclear energy expansion for reliable, clean energy in the state. Respectfully ask for a favorable vote on SB 643. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gallion. Ms. Pavlock.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Alex Pavlak, a PhD engineer from Severna Park, chairman of the Future of Energy Initiative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for an opportunity to provide a comment on 643. I'd like to look at this, again, providing a little more insight into RGGI, which is, in my view, the root cause of a lot of the distortions that we're seeing here. Maryland RGGI works great. I'm sorry, New England RGGI works great. And the reason is that as a carbon tax, it increases the price of coal beyond that of natural gas. Coal goes out of business, natural gas thrives, because everybody in the market is a RGGI state, and natural gas can pass its costs on to the ratepayer. The downside of that is the ratepayers' rates go up, and New England prices are double our prices, so that's where we're headed. The dysfunction here is that Maryland is surrounded by non-RGGI states, and we're all part of the PJM market. So when you increase the cost of doing business for natural gas in Maryland, they can no longer compete. And over a period of a decade, they'll let their plant and equipment go to hell, and they will eventually become a zombie plant and go out of business because they can no longer compete with cheap imported electricity. How to fix this is not clear, and I like that task force idea that was proposed, Senator West was proposing. There are market solutions. What I like is a tariff on imported electricity. That would balance the market out so that you had a vibrant, viable electricity market. Right now, you don't have a viable electricity market in the state of Maryland. It's and RGGI is the dysfunction that's at the root of a lot of these difficulties. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pavlak. Any questions for Senator Gallion or our witness? Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 640. Concludes our bill hearings for today. Folks, we could take about a 10. Do some voting, okay?